We've done it yet again. We've done it yet again. Boy, am I having a chill one today. Me and my little pug, we've just been sitting here this whole time, chilling out, having a good time, having a good day, recovering from yesterday, right? Recovering from big protest yesterday. Is this? No. Change. Got a really interesting, oh, come on now. Get out of here. There we go. Somebody introduced me to this idea just the other day. Maybe the other week. You know how when you get older, you say like the other day as if it's like, yesterday, and then you actually think about it and you're like, oh, that happened 2 years ago. And, but they introduced me to this channel where it's just a person walking around China. Just walking around China, showing China. Like, no commentary, no nothing. Literally, just like I'm walking around China. Here's what China looks like. And I gotta tell you, I really enjoy it. I really enjoy it. I enjoy showing it. I enjoy living in it. I enjoy having it around me. Because, show Pug Boy, he's all cuddled up and comfortable. Maybe later on throwaway. I don't think I've ever seen you on the chat. Good to see you. Already angling for the pug? I appreciate it. And I think it's important that we try to stop being so goddamn scared of other countries, Stop being so scared of China. Stop being so scared. And you get to see, not only do you get to see the beautiful ancient culture of China, and sometimes this channel shows its more modern side as well. But I think the most important part about it is that as he's walking around, he just shows people living in the world, and shows the Chinese people just existing as they are. No commentary, no nothing. Literally just, here we go, right? Let's go, and let's just see the world as it is, without any judgment or condemnation or xenophobia or any of that. And I feel especially here in Canada, something like 70 to 80% of Canadians were in favor of boycotting the Beijing Olympics, which I'm just that's just xenophobia. That's just, and also the high levels of propaganda that we have been experiencing here in Canada. That honestly, if it hadn't been for for the last 5 years here in Canada, it's just been an indoctrination session. It's been an incredible propaganda experience here in Canada. Just the high level of lies that have reached the highest level of our government. Literally, Aaron O'Toole still talks about the Uyghur genocide, which has been widely discredited. Hey Ruth, how you doing? Good to see you. Good to see you, Ruth. And for God's sakes, the CIA will put on a symposium, and the liberals and everybody will show up and then vote in favor of it, and it's just gross propagandistic, xenophobic lies. And all it really takes to start breaking some of this stuff down is just to see somebody walking around in China and being these are normal people living in a normal society where normal things happen. And you see how beautiful it is, and you see how wonderful and rich a society it is. And you really do start to think about yourself oh, are these prejudices that I am layering on China? Is it right to define China by these small historical events, right? Pug Panda. I'm sure he'll eventually want to come over and sit on my lap. Throwaway. Stick around. He'll come around. Were you trying to write hashtag pug propaganda? Propaganda and a pug. Oh my god. Pug-a-panda. Yeah. Doesn't quite work, does it? You want to be propaganda, but pug-a-ganda. I know where you're coming from, Throwaway. I know where you're coming from. Yeah, did you hear how we want to invade the island of Taiwan now? Yeah, for fuck's sake, we'll never learn. Yeah. And the history of Taiwan is a fascinating one, right? And I feel like everybody should know it, and it's complete journalistic malpractice that any article that talks about Taiwan does not explicitly state the actual history of what's going on there. That Taiwan exists as like this, in this kind of like limbo state, right, politically, that the ruling class of China was on the what is currently known today as the island of Taiwan, right? That they were ruling from this island, right, as the rulers of China, as a monarchy essentially, and the Communist Party of China comes up and fights against them, right? Pushes them out of the mainland. They take over the mainland, right? They take over the mainland, and the ruling class retreats to Taiwan. Mao wants to take Taiwan for obvious reasons, right? The taking of Taiwan, while not militarily or strategically that important, is a symbolic victory for the Chinese people and for especially the Communist Party of China. That it's the end of that era. And Mao seeks and begins the process of invading that island and invading it. Why is he not successful? Why can he not do it? Because the Americans prevent him from doing it. They put warships between Taiwan and China. They prevent the Chinese military, the communists, from getting onto the mainland of Taiwan, from getting into the island, from actually taking it over. And that's essentially the state that we have been in since the time of Mao. That any time the Chinese want to assert a presence in Taiwan, the Americans interfere and get in the way, putting this conversation in a perpetual state of limbo. Since that time, the international community has recognized that Taiwan is part of China, right? While China has never been able to claim it militarily because of United States interference, the international community acknowledges that Taiwan, largely, that Taiwan is part of China. Taiwan has never declared its independence. It's never made any move to say that it is not part of China. If anything, Taiwan has called it, people within Taiwan has called itself the true China, right? Because it's where the Chinese ruling class lives, which is sort of a foolish thing to say because the actual ruling class of China is obviously the Communist Party of China. Like, that's really obvious. You got to be like real xenophobic nail in your head to still be walking around being like, no, the true ruling party of China is the royalty. Yeah, those guys. Like, be like saying that the true ruling class of Canada is the Queen of England, you know? Like, no. Like, no, bro, we don't take that seriously. And if it wasn't for American interference, this conversation would have ended a long time ago. The Chinese Communist Party would have taken Taiwan long ago. And we all would have moved on from it forever ago. Why do the Americans not want that to happen? Very obvious strategic reasons, right? They would like Taiwan to be a military base for them. Very straightforward. The Americans want Taiwan to become independent, right? And in this world, that exists, there really is no such thing as like an independent nation. It doesn't really exist, right? You either are of your own system, which you think about a small island like Taiwan, like it's not going to be able to be prosperous or work without being connected to like the larger trade network in the world. And so if you declare your independence from China, you're just immediately connected in to the world banking system, like the World Bank and all of the IMF and all of these neoliberal institutions that have been erected over the last 30, 40 years. And America is immediately going to put a military base right fucking there. Yeah, it's also a manufacturing hub for cheap labor, but that's true of China as well, pissed off Canadian. Yeah, computer parts, absolutely. Like, Taiwan has important things that it offers, and America doesn't want China to be able to outright say, like, this is part of China, right? And so steadily the Americans, and should America, or should China rather, actually take Taiwan, which it is Like Taiwan is part of China, China is part of Taiwan. Like it's it's like saying like Manitoba is part of Canada, Canada is part of Manitoba, right? Like it's a province of China, for sure. And the Americans will prevent them from doing so, right, militarily, until they can't, which is where we're kind of heading towards now. And the reality of what is happening in Taiwan is that it's always been American interference. The Americans don't own Taiwan. They don't own China, right? It is a conversation that is between Taiwan and China. It always has been, right? And America has no right by any international law or any international position or anything to stand in the way of this conversation. This is why it's so funny to me when Americans start to complain about like Chinese interference in their democracy. Like, no one interferes more with governing affairs than the Americans. They literally put military vessels between China and Taiwan in order to continue pushing this conversation forward. Like, that's the definition of interference in foreign affairs, right? Like, so the Americans complaining like oh, Chinese democracy, like China is interfering in our democracy. I'm like, shut up. Like, it's so childish. Like, it's so childish to say this. Like, grow the fuck up. What did you think of the anti-imperialism summit in Cuba? Makes sense. It was a reaction to the democracy summit, right? Like, lots of performative, just very performative, right? And I mean, that's fine. Like, so so performances are necessary sometime. And Cuba really is like standing up and trying to just like snub its nose right in America's face. Like, Cuba's like right off the coast of Florida. Like, it's right fucking there. And the idea that it's standing up doing like anti-imperialist summits and things like this, like, ooh boy. It's like the Cubans are like pulling their pants down and just mooning America, basically. Like, basically. Which makes sense because Cuba is one of the most successful communist nations in history, and it's been successful in spite of the sanctions that have been put on against it. It's been successful in spite of the U.S. imperialism that's against it. It's always been a little odd to me that America doesn't just invade it. Like, really, I do wonder, like, what is the true... I don't know why it doesn't just invade it. It's invaded lots of places, right? It's invaded most of South America, most of the Middle East by now. It's invading, like, African countries. Like, I truly am a bit perplexed. I always have been a bit perplexed why the Americans don't just move troops in or at least bomb the place to shit like they do everywhere else. And the only thing that I think actually does prevent it from happening is that large sections of the Canadian populace, as well as the European populace, don't have the xenophobic positioning with Cuba, that we actually fell in love with Cuba, that we like their goods. We see them as humans. I think that's the problem with this relationship, is that the Americans, I think if it was just to America, they would just bomb the shit out of the place and send troops in and take it over and be done with it, right? Like they did with Haiti, like they did with the Dominican Republic, right? Like, why is Cuba special? That's the big question I keep asking myself, right? And I think the real separation and the real thing that where it lands on is that Canada and the Europeans view the Cuban population as human, whereas like the Haitians, they do not, right? And I really do think it comes down to just straight up racism. Like, Haitians are very black, Cubans are not. And I really do think it lands on that. And so if America starts talking about we're going to bomb Cuba and take over Cuba, I think the Europeans and the Canadians would view that very negatively, because somehow the Cubans have managed to pierce through the veil of xenophobia that's required to maintain the American empire, and they see the Cuban people not as lesser humans to be dominated as we see fit, but as human beings. I don't know how that was managed. I really hope that places like Haiti and the Dominican Republic and the Middle East and South America and all these places can turn that corner and get viewed as humans too. That would be really nice if like places like Venezuela could be viewed as humans. But it hasn't stopped the Americans from putting on a regime of sanctions, but that hasn't stopped the Cubans from becoming a very stable nation in and of itself. Like the amount of fraternity and solidarity that exists in Cuba is pretty telling. That even in the face of these mass sanctions, they're still maintaining their communist roots, and they still admire Fidel Castro as a leader. And it looks like even though Fidel Castro is dead, they're still moving forward with these communist ideals. And honestly, like when you go to Cuba, I've been to Cuba once. Beautiful country, beautiful people, lovely place, lovely place. All if we got rid of the sanctions, like if the sanction regime was lifted on Cuba, in 5 years it would be indistinguishable from any Western nation. That what they are really lacking in Cuba is tools. Like really what they're lacking is just basic tools, right? Like I witnessed people doing jobs in Cuba that was taking them months and weeks to do, that if they had like a Dremel, right? Just a Dremel, the job would be done in 5 minutes. Like they just don't have access to markets. They don't have access to the larger, wider world because of the sanctions. It'd be bad if sanctions were lifted? How? Like, how? Like, if the sanction regime was lifted on Cuba, they would have access to markets. They would actually be able to buy tools, right? The only reason why the Cubans haven't been able to, like, they created their own vaccine to coronavirus. And the only reason they aren't able to spread it around more than they do is because they lack access to basic, like needles, like basic stuff, right? That if they had access, it would get more industrialized and all that green would go away. But I mean, that's just a theory, right? That's just a kind of an imperialist idea, right? Like that's would it? Like they already have plantations and factories that don't get worked in because they don't have a market to sell in, right? It's actually far more likely that what would happen in Cuba is that they would just use the factories and the plantations that they already have and start selling those goods into the markets, right? Like the American market for Cuban cigars alone, right? Like Cuban cigars have like a legendary status in America, right? How many movies do you need to see where there's like a guy and he's like, have a cigar. They're Cubans, wink. Like, and Cuban rum, sugar, just sugar, right? Like these are goods that the Cuban people already produce. They have factories built ready to go. They've got plantations already cleared and set up and ready to go, and they just don't use them. And they don't use them because there's no point, because there's no market to sell to, right? So what would happen instantly, boom, like it would be a 1 year process that they would just walk into the factories they have, they would walk into the plantations they already have, and they would use them. Don't get me wrong, I think you are right. Your suspicion of would the Cubans be able to clamp down on the greed, right? The greed aspect of it. Like, oh, we're selling so much to the market, we could sell more. And like, how much longer until some leadership starts to be like, we could clear cut this place, sell all that lumber, right? Like, don't get me wrong. Like, I think that those base human desires are still there, and I would be concerned about that for Cuba as well. But I think you just need to say, like, but the Cuban people and their ruling class have done them right so far, right? Why like people critique China this way too all the time, right? It's this supposition. It's this well, this may happen. It's like, okay, but like it's not, and until it actually does happen, or until we see a path where it is happening, it's not fair to put this at their feet and say, oh, like, because essentially what you're saying is, oh, if we opened up the market, they'd just fuck it up. It's like, would they? Like, would they? Everything I've seen about Cuba and its own ruling people, it's really attempting to keep itself stable, and that's what it's all about when it comes to governing. It's all about stability, right? Like here in the West, we are destabilizing ourselves in massive ways. Like the massive amount of destabilization that is occurring in America and Canada is going to have profound effects, right? And what do I mean when I say we're destabilizing ourselves? Well, we're abandoning huge sections of our population, right? Like that has a profound destabilizing effect on a society. The idea that people within a society can even be abandoned in the first place is extremely destabilizing. It really means that, like, oh, you don't actually have a community. You don't actually have social structures. You don't actually have rules that are worth following. And this frays away at what should be a robust and healthy civilization, right? Like, this is the great shame of the West, like Canada and the United States. We should be like a powerful, robust, stable civilization, and we're not. We're just not. And it's because fundamentally we don't understand that the backbone of what makes a civilization are its people, and that your society and your civilization truly is only as powerful as the weakest members in it. Very much like a chain, right? A chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Well, if you think about that in terms, like, and then go take a look at how many homeless exist in our society, you start to see, like, oh, there are weak links. There are big weak links. And the fascists would respond to this by saying, well, then eliminate the weak links, right? Whereas the socialist and the communist responds by saying, well, then strengthen the weak link, right? Take links that are already strong enough and don't need to be reinforced, and use that material in order to actually strengthen the weakest links. And then you'll have a stable system and a stable society. And these are hard lessons that we're going to have to learn, right? If we ever can, honestly. We'll see how it goes. Okay, with all of that said, I think I'm going to move on, say farewell to this lovely walking tour that we're on, and everybody pick a number between 1 and 10. You got to pick a number between 1 and 10. Those are the rules. Today's number is, I'm going with a 3.
Here we go for today's number.
The wonderful and powerful
it's
David Lynch.
December 16, 2021. 10 balls.
Nova Scotia coming in with
Each
a 4.
Each ball has a number.
We've got a 5. We've got a 10.
Numbers 1 through 10.
Numbers 1 through 10. Harry with an 8.
Swirl the numbers.
Swirl the numbers. My favorite part. Here we go.
Pick a number.
And we got a doubling down on 8s.
Today's number is
10.
10.
Pissed off Canadian. You did it, bud. You did it. Throwaway coming in late with a 7. That's okay. We got pissed off Canadian. You won today, buddy. Go buy the lotto ticket. Go make it happen. All right. In honor of that, let's play a tune. This is one of my favorites. I made this. Now, do you want to select one, bud, or do you want the random generated one? Because the random generated one is going to be one of the slower ones, I think. That's going to be... Come on now. That's going to be this one. All right. Here we go. Then it's this one. Let's go. straight with your shoulders back. Tighten that heart, give it no slack. Find another way to fill that void. Fill that order, do as you're told. No one cares, you're getting old. The fake smiles, they just make you annoyed. Get lost in your illusions. Pornography engine. Go save another princess. It won't save you from your sin. Wounded apes go on the attack. Dig too deep, can't take it back. Broken hearts will never let it go. Sold out for your even born. Try to eat, but it's all gone. Why sell yourself just to put on a show? Pornography engine. Go save another princess. It won't save you from your sin. Stupid monkey on a burning rock. Reach the stars, grabbing his cock. Pump and dump your soul to get to Mars. Dreams don't mean a single thing. Don't worry what tomorrow brings. Surely it will only leave a scar. Lost in your illusions. Pornography engine. Go save another princess. It won't save you from your sin. Pornography engine. Go save another princess. It won't save you from your sin. It won't save you from your sin. Save you from your sin. I am so happy I can hit that last note. It's like right at the bottom. I don't know if that's what you were expecting, Pissed Off Canadian, but that's what you got. That's what you got. Do I feel like singing another one? I do. I gotta pull this one up though. I don't know why I've been so entranced by this one recently, but I really have been. There's something mystical going on with this song and me. And I can tell that the song wants me to get it memorized, and then it's gonna unlock something, and I'm not there yet, so I'm gonna do it this way. Ah, fucking up. See what I'm talking about, right? So much for mysticism. Ugh, I'm fucking it up, my guys. I'm gonna do it anyway. In my eyes, indisposed, in disguises no one knows, hides the face, lies the snake, the sun in my disgrace. Boiling heat, summer stench, 'neath the black the sky looks dead. Call my name through the cream and I'll hear you scream again. Black old sun, won't you come and wash away the rain? Black old sun, won't you come, won't you come, won't you come? Stuttering, cold and damp, steal the warm wind, tired friend. Times are gone for honest men, and sometimes far too long for snakes. In my shoes, a walk and sleep. In my youth, I pray to keep heaven send hell away. No one sings like you anymore. Black old sun, won't you come and wash away the rain? Black old sun, won't you come, won't you come? Black old sun, won't you come and wash away the rain? Black old sun, won't you come, won't you come? Black old sun, won't you come and wash away the rain? Black old sun, won't you come, won't you come, won't you come? It's such a kick-ass song, man. Chris Cornell, wherever you are, bud. Wherever you are, thank you so much. You were a gift unto the world. You left us far too soon. Yeah, when Chris Cornell committed suicide, that was a big deal for me, you know? It wasn't a big deal. I didn't understand how big a deal it was at the time. Like, I kind of just took it like a piece of news. And now that I'm older and I'm playing some of his music and starting to kind of connect to it, man, that guy was connecting into dark energy. That's really what it is, like dark energy, you know? Like, really manifesting, like taking ideas like depression, like we have, and like seeing kind of the decaying society around him, especially throughout the 90s, where like the suburban culture took over, right? And so much of the 90s is driven, like Nirvana and Smashing Pumpkins and all this, is driven by this like suburban hellscape that gets created. And suburbia is just this like empty graveyard of human life that only exists because of vehicles and can only exist because of vehicles, right? And it's just like telling everybody that, oh yeah, what you really want is like a house, and like you want a house, and if you have your little mansion, then you can be the king of this place and all this, and like, but there's an emptiness there, And if you watch the music video Black Hole Sun, it's like explicit. It's explicit that like people are walking around like smiling, big grotesque, inhuman smiles, doing their like daily tasks to cover up this like existential dread that exists within each and every one of them. And we live in this like false society that is like, it's like the equivalent of saying, when somebody asks you, hey, how you doing? You say, I'm fine, right? Everybody knows that. You just say, I'm fine, right? But that's our whole culture. Our whole culture is just saying, oh yeah, I'm fine. When underneath there's like this deep dread and this deep rot or an inability to articulate the reality of our existential position. And Black Hole Sun is really a call for the end. Can the end come already? Can entropy just eat us up already? Because it's ignoring it that's the hardest part. It's the pretending as though it isn't happening that's the hardest part. You know? I feel like if a man like Chris Cornell was living in a society where everyone was openly talking about the reality of our lives and how we are being dragged into this entropy, each and every one of us, I think he would have been a happier person. That it would have been easier to live in solidarity and truth than to ignore it and pretend as though it's not happening, while maintaining this like mythological idea that somehow I'm a king because I have a castle. These absurd McMansions, these grotesque like outcroppings that truly only exist because we burn the dead. So wherever you are, Mr. Cornell, I hope you're doing well. Or I hope, and I think he would hope this of himself, I hope that he's sleeping peacefully. So, this is actually an interesting piece of news. Something interesting has happened in the House for once, as opposed to just like idiots bickering amongst one another. Leah Gazan introduces a bill to bring in a livable basic income.
Mr. Speaker, it is my honor to introduce the National Framework for a Guaranteed Livable Basic Income Act. I would like to start out by thanking the Member of Parliament for Elmwood-Transcona for seconding my bill, my riding of Winnipeg Centre, Basic Income Canada Network, Basic Income Manitoba, Coalition Canada, Basic Income Canada Youth Network, Senator Kim Pate, former Senator Hugh Segal, and so many other anti-poverty activists across this country who contributed to the development of this bill. As we continue to find ways to make it through the pandemic, we know that those who were already left behind are even further behind. Mr. Speaker, this bill is in response to calls to implement a guaranteed livable basic income from Indigenous, territorial, provincial, and municipal jurisdictions who clearly recognize the need to modernize our social safety net. A JLBI is not a panacea, but a way forward to modernize our social safety net in addition to current and future government programs and supports. It will ensure that all people have the necessary supports and resources to live with dignity, security, respect, and human rights as affirmed in the Canadian Charter of Rights and Freedoms. I'd once again like to thank my constituents and the basic income movement for your support. This is a people's movement.
Ms. Gazan, seconded by Mr. Blakey, moves that the bill be now read a first time and be printed. This motion is deemed adopted.
First reading of this bill, première lecture de...
So the reason why this is important is that we have to make them vote this kind of legislation down. Like outright. Like these sorts of bills need to be put forward. They need to move along the path so that the Liberals and Conservatives are forced to vote it down in front of us, so that we can see them for what they are, right? Which are just unrepentant sociopathic corporatists. Like they serve the capitalist death cult. So good for the NDP, good for Leah Gazan, right? Good that this is being pushed forward. And it is also worth critiquing and pointing out that from the communist perspective, right? A basic income is a capitalist panacea. It is a capitalist solution to the problems that exist within capitalism. That part of the design of the capitalist system is that people are exploited and thrown out of the system. And that's why the system ultimately collapses. You can see that very clearly and cleanly in the housing market discussion. That the way capital has arranged itself is by throwing people out of the housing market by hoarding the resource that everybody needs to get access to. And this increases homelessness, this increases despair in the populace, especially despair amongst people who really have done everything right. Like, well, everything right, but they followed the rules completely. They were perfectly obedient. I have many friends who have been perfectly obedient to this system, who said straight out, I'm going to follow the rules. I'm going to become like a lawyer, a doctor, an engineer. I'm going to do everything I'm told. I'm going to say, yes, sir. I'm going to do the best job that I possibly can. And now they're in a position where, and now they can't afford the house that they were promised all along. So the carrot that they were given, right, turns out that the carrot was never there. It didn't exist in the first place. And this creates despair in the populace. Is there any mystery why the capitalist death cult is failing? Is there any mystery why people are turning against capitalism? There's no mystery whatsoever. The capitalist system itself betrays even its most virulent defenders. That ultimately everyone is sacrificed upon its altar. And it's become quite obvious and quite clear. And so something like a basic income at least prevents the worst possible outcomes. The trouble, of course, with the basic income is that it doesn't actually alleviate the central problems of capital. That capital will still hoard all the resources, will still set the prices. Like, now we're hearing that much of this inflation commentary, we're starting to find out that it's not even inflation. It's just corporations raising prices to gouge consumers. Like, that's literally it. And then blaming it on inflation. Oh yeah, this is happening because of inflation. And we find like internal documents and memos and things where they're literally like, no, just raise that by 20%. We'll just blame it on inflation. So the system itself is corrupted, and I am concerned that even a reform like a basic income, which I argue for, I think that a basic income being passed is important and a good thing, and it sets a good precedent for our society, that at least the people who are trying to push forward a basic income are attempting to find solutions. They're attempting to say, we will not abandon the populace, and this seems like a good idea and a good way to do it. So that creates at the very least, this creates a community and a culture that is fighting against issues of poverty. Like, all of the groups she just mentioned, right? It's very likely that if a basic income was passed and then it didn't work, right, that those groups would be the groups that would spin off into the next project of poverty alleviation. Looks like I arrived just in time for the big topic of the day. Well, they're all big topics, Matthias. And now that you're here, bud, now that you're here, it is the big topic for sure. And I'm just happy to hear that it's being pushed forward in Parliament whatsoever. Right? Like, I've gotten quite used to the idea that the Liberals and the Conservatives are just not going to do anything. But now here comes the NDP forcing them to do something. And what they'll do is vote it down, obviously. But we should put them in a position where they have to vote it down. Like, real simply. Like, have them vote it down so that we can say, like, this is the party you're voting for. You're voting for the party of poverty. You're voting for the party that's spreading around poverty and making things difficult for people. Weird choice. Like, really, really weird. Like, at this point, I'm asking people, can you give me a reason why you're voting for these guys? And nobody ever can. Like, nobody actually has a reason for why they vote conservative and liberal. Like, literally the liberal response is like, well, if I don't vote liberal, then the conservative gets in. And my response to this is just like, so fucking what? Like, so fucking what? These liberals are not better. Like, in no way are they better. Like, they'll wave a little pride flag in your face, but, like, then they'll tell you to go to work. Like, it's getting to be kind of obscene, honestly. Like, and I shouldn't even say kind of obscene. It's getting obscene. Like, we now know that the liberals are, like, training Nazi groups in Ukraine. Like, which, incidentally, I've got a little thing on that. Save that one for if I need to go use the bathroom. Oh, come on, John. I'm so organized. I'm the most organized person on earth. Oh, yeah, here it is. Like, literally the second one. I just started at the wrong thing. This is a timeline of UN votes against glorification of Nazism and neo-Nazism from 2014 to 2020. So, red is against, yellow is abstention, green is in favor of the adoption. So, without even... here, I'll hit play. And then... Yeah. Images of Nazism, right? And the official bill is... hold on. Is it going to go away? No. Oh, well. It's the UN General Assembly vote combating glorification of Nazism, neo-Nazism, and other practices that contribute to fueling contemporary forms of racism, radical discrimination, xenophobia, and related intolerance. And 2014. Who are the abstentions, right? So Canada votes no. Haha, yeah, Nazism. Isn't Nazism great? We should be able to glorify Nazism, right? Canada votes no. The United States votes no. Not surprisingly, Ukraine votes no. The abstentions, of course, being the traditional allies of these forces, what I like to call total fucking cowards. Total fucking cowards. The UK was bombed to rubble because of the Nazis. France, Spain, you think about the Eastern Bloc, right? Like, it's total cowardice. Germany itself abstains. Gross. Fucking gross. So, flip over to 2015, same story, no change. Flip over to 2016. Oh, hey, Canada has now realized that, this is a fucking embarrassing thing to do. That only a duplicitous, evil, dark society would say that we should be able to glorify Nazism, right? So, oh goodness, now we flipped over, finding our senses to some degree. 2017, couple of people who weren't there for the vote, same story though. 2018, same story. 2019, we got some more abstentions. Big surprise, Afghanistan, right? Big surprise, Turkey, right? And then 2020, just somebody who's not there for the vote. So literally, the world is divided, and it's divided along the lines that you expect the world to be divided along. You've got Russia, China, the Eastern countries, right? India, Africa, South America. So what's called the global South, right? By the xenophobes and racists in our media, which is just a fucking brutal thing to say to somebody. Anyway, global South. Okay, great. They're in the Southern Hemisphere. Certainly it has nothing to do with our oppression and that they're of a lower status that we're just admitting out loud. Anyway. As you can see, they're all, since this whole time, they just want, Nazis. Fuck these guys, right? On the question of Nazis, America and Ukraine are like, Nazis, no. We are voting against this. Nazis, no. Right? Canada, Europe, Australia, Japan. The shocker for me has always been Germany itself, right? Oh, that's a good question, actually. Good observation, pissed off Canadian, right? I think you're 2014. Yes, I think that's right, actually. What year did Justin Trudeau become Prime Minister? Yeah, assumed office 2015. I think that's an astute... So he assumed office in 2015, right? And then the next year, doink, abstains. That's Trudeau. That's how Trudeau goes. Like when the House voted, when the NDP were involved in this too, which was highly disappointing. When the Conservatives and the NDP voted in favor of declaring the non-event in Xinjiang province a Uyghur genocide, Trudeau abstained. Right? That's how he rolls. Like he has no spine. He just doesn't want, like, when he knows things are wrong, he abstains from them. But it's very much this Pontius Pilate, like, washing of the hands, right? Just like, oh, well, I'll just wash my hands and that will maintain my integrity, which it doesn't at all. Grow a spine. Like, grow a fucking spine. Vote against this. Like, or vote in favor of the resolution. Like, Nazis are bad. It's creepy. It's incredibly creepy that we live in a country who fought against the Nazis. Every hero I ever had growing up murdered Nazis. Indiana Jones was literally going around just murdering Nazis. And I was just like, yay, murder Nazis. Superman was like punching Adolf Hitler, right? Like all of our heroes were fucking blowing Nazis up. And we were all just like, yes, good, excellent, blow Nazis up, right? Like, fuck, even into the modern period, right? You've got like Inglorious Bastards. You've got like Jojo and the Rabbit. Like you've got like Nazis are like this universal, like truism of like, yeah, they're evil. Nazis are evil, right? And anybody actually disagree with this? And turns out, America, Ukraine, all of Europe, Australia, and Canada. And Greenland, incidentally, and Japan, all agree. No, Nazis are fine. No, Nazism. Like, we can glorify Nazis, right? I don't really have an opinion. Maybe we're the baddies? Do you think maybe we're the baddies? Yeah, I mean, we do keep voting against a resolution against the glorification of Nazism. Like, do you think maybe we're the bad guys? And like if you go along, like it gets real fucking creepy. Cause what do? Well, what's going on in Ukraine? Oh yeah, the Azov fighters with NATO, swastika, and Azov flag. Oh yeah. Azov is now part of the government. The government supported by the West. It was incorporated into the National Guard. The leader of Azov was in parliament until 2019. Roman Prasadovich, the guy that got caught over Belarus in an airplane, fought for Azov. NATO and EU claim he's an opposition journalist, which he is not. During the 2021 election, even the German Green Party campaigned for arming fascist Ukraine. Solidarity to fascists to mess with the Russians. This mirrors history. During the Weimar Republic, the communists called the Social Democrats social fascists, pseudo-progressives at home, but pro-fascists abroad. Brutal. NATO is one of the biggest terrorist organizations and the greatest threat to world peace. And of course, they end this with the classic, like, NATO's military funding, China's military funding, the rest of the fucking world. It takes a no-brainer to see what's going on in the world today, right? It takes, like, no-brainer at all. If the only thing you saw was this graph, you would be like, oh yeah, this is like an oppressive, dominating empire. Like, there's no other explanation for it. Mark, you're in very late for the number draw, and it was a 10. It was a 10. Your strategy of constantly picking 7, not panning out. Kevin, he said, make Germany fascist free. Sorry, bud, who said that? I think your comment is getting decontextualized. Are we talking about this guy here? Anyway. So, fun times. Super cool that we're all pro-Nazi over here. Or at least, if not pro-Nazi, definitely like, I don't really have an opinion on Nazis. Yeah. The U.S. brought all the Nazi scientists, and IBM helped track prisoners. The Bayer used to make poison to kill prisoners. Exactly. No, I've been saying this over and over. The more research you do on the lead up to World War II, right, the more you really realize. I don't know why I'm pulling up the map. It's because I like maps, okay? I like maps. It's very simple. His name means make Germany fascist free. Oh yeah, Macht Deutschland vom Fascismus frei. Yeah, Macht is great. Macht is one of the great commentators that keeps me honest. Anytime I start kind of going into la la land, Macht always puts a lasso on me and pulls me back down, or fascist free typo. I don't know why, Kevin, but the phrase fascist free typo, it's like an indie band, right? It's like an indie grunge rock metal band. Fascist free typo. I don't know. Anyway. On the lead up to World War II, right? The narrative that came out of the Americans was always like, well, we don't really want to get involved. This is mainly a European issue, really. But the reality is that the Americans were making money in Germany, right? They were selling shit to the Germans. Fucking Hitler was man of the year twice. Like, you don't get to be man of the year twice and have virtues extolled propagandistically within your borders unless you're fucking allied to these guys, right? And the reason why the Americans don't go to war against Germany, well, for what? Right? Like, so Germany goes and claims France because America gives a shit about France. Although America owes a lot to France, frankly. But, so Germany takes over France. And by the time that happens, because of the Blitzkrieg, it was over instantly, right? Everyone always shits on the French for this. But I'm like, what are you talking about? A new military tactic with a new military technology that the Germans unleashed for like the first time on the French people, and it was and it worked completely and caught the French down. Like, what do you want them to do? Like, what do you want them to do? You would surrender too, like you would. Anyway, and then what? Germany starts bombing England. Yeah, because America has like a real like, we love England, right? Certainly there isn't a culture of like, we need to arm the populace against the King of England, right? The whole fucking Second Amendment, like. So Germany's takes over France, starts bombing the shit out of England. America's like, cool. Like, what's the fucking problem? Who gives a shit, right? Their corporations sell technology to the Germans so that they can enact their concentration camps, right? They sell, like Coca-Cola sells stuff. It's been said in the chat, Bayer, right, made the poison to kill the prisoners, all that kind of stuff. So the Americans and the Germans, on the lead up to World War II and throughout World War II, were allies. They worked with one another. America made money from Germany, and Germany benefited greatly from its allegiance and its trade agreements to the United States. And the only reason the Americans actually get into the war, right? So the narrative is, the Japanese bombed Pearl Harbor, and that brings the United States into the war, where they promptly invade a different country completely. Sound familiar? Sound familiar? Right? 9/11 happened. We think he's in Afghanistan. Let's take out Iraq. You know? Sound familiar? Sound familiar? Yeah, playing both sides, selling weapons to the UK, right? Roosevelt recognized Vichy France. Yeah. Like they were allied to Adolf Hitler and the Germans. Like maybe it wasn't like an official allegiance, but certainly there were trade agreements and trade arrangements happening there. Yeah, it's the same now with Saudi Arabia and Yemen. That's exactly right. But Saudi Arabia's the only reason why there hasn't been like massive unrest and massive civil revolution is because of America. Right? Because America keeps selling weapons, keeps arming the military, keeps training troops, keeps doing all this kind of stuff. And straight up, Saudi Arabia is positioning itself absolutely brilliantly. Absolutely brilliantly. Like, these guys are evil Machiavellian geniuses. Like, they are going to step into the next phase clean. They're going to be rich. They're going to be prosperous. They're going to be connected to the Belt and Road Initiative. They're going to be considered an invaluable ally to China and its aims. China will view any other nation like Iraq, Iran, Afghanistan, Pakistan that is attempting to mess with Saudi Arabia in a very negative light. They will argue for peace in the region, and it's likely that they'll get it, because what force is going to even bother standing up to like go to war against Saudi Arabia, even though everybody knows what's going on? Saudi Arabia's position literally is like, what are you going to do about it? Like, what are you going to do about it? So unless people start losing their goddamn minds, which is perfectly possible, Saudi Arabia is going to be like real clean. They're going to look real good coming out of this period of time. That's life, baby. That's life. And it's highly likely that once the Americans withdraw from Iraq and the Belt and Road Initiative starts going into Iraq and then down into Neom, which is the plan, right? It's incredibly likely that like Saudi Arabia, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan will just sort of peace up, and it'll be brought up. Like people aren't going to forget, but like the Saudis are just going to be like, well, what are you going to do about it? How much American capital in Germany was Trump money? Any? I don't know, dude. I don't know. I haven't done the research on that. They amended the Neutrality Act in November 1939 to allow trade of armaments to Britain, but they were funding the Imperial Japanese until mid-1940. Yeah. No, they're playing all sides. And the true reason why they go in, right? They use Pearl Harbor as the impetus, but they would have found another reason, right? If it hadn't been for Pearl Harbor, it would have been something else, right? And the reason why they go in to Europe to get to Germany, right, to fight against the Nazis and all this kind of stuff, is because if they didn't, then the Soviets would take over Europe, and they wouldn't have a bargaining chip. Like, the Soviets would take over Europe, and that would be it. The Soviets would take over Europe. And, like, the Americans going in and drawing a line between Germany at least allows a negotiation to occur. It protects France, Spain, Portugal, Italy, right? And from the Soviets, because the Americans view the Soviets as their enemy, right? The plan was after Adolf Hitler was dealt with, the plan by the Allies was to bomb the shit out of Russia, right? Like, that's what they wanted to do. Churchill wanted to fucking devastate Russia. They wanted to bomb the hell out of it. And if it wasn't for the fact that Russia built a nuclear bomb, they would have. But once the nuke got built, oh no, son. Oh no. And like, think about how psychotic the Americans are during this period of time. So like, the war with Japan, which is largely once again between the Russians and the Japanese and the Chinese, right? And the Japanese, right? So the Americans come in, park some boats over here, get hit by some kamikaze fighters, say like, yeah, we were the greatest fucking fighting force in there. And then as the Japanese are capitulating, as they are drawing up surrender documents, they get nuked twice, right? And it's completely so that Truman can say to the Russians, look what I can do. I could do, this could be your city. This could be your city. You're next, right? And the Truman, the idea that like, we had to nuke them or else we would have had more casualties and all, because it's total bullshit. Even Truman's own generals were saying that it was too much, right? Like, Trump owes a lot of money to Germany through Deutsche Bank. Well, who doesn't Trump owe money to, right? Like, Trump's great success as a financier is understanding how to manipulate the system. Like, he really understands how to just, like, leverage the system for his own benefit. Like, he's actually quite brilliant in that regard. Japan bombed Hawaii, not the U.S. The night Hawaii was bombed was the first time the U.S. started referring to Hawaii as part of the U.S. Is that true, Isaac? I didn't even know that. That's so funny, dude. You're probably right, too. Like, that's exactly the way the U.S. would operate, right? Like, there's just, like, little what happened? This little island, right, off the coast, right? What is going on? Holy cow. Little island off the coast, right? Like, probably never even talked about it, never referred to it at all. Although, like, there's plenty of media. Although a lot of that is, like, post-World War II, now that I think about it, right? Like, there's a lot of, like, Hawaiian-based, like Elvis Presley goes to Honolulu, right? That kind of thing. But that's all very like post-World War II. Oh yeah. Fucking. Yep, doublespeak. One American soldier who fought in the Pacific Campaign said in reference to other GIs, "I doubt any of them knew where Pearl Harbor was." Yeah. I think about that a lot, actually. Like, why did the Japanese do that? Like, what was the actual, like, modus operandi for them? I don't understand what they were hoping to gain, right? Unless, and this is what's interesting about this conversation, right? Like, it's always talked about that, like, Japan bombs Pearl Harbor and that drew the Americans into the war. But America was already in the war, right? Like, if you're funding people in the war, you're in the war. Just because you don't have boots on the ground doesn't mean you're not in the war. Yeah, the Allies had already achieved all bombing targets in Japan when the A-bombs were dropped. That's right, Harry. That's right. That, like, the war was over. They were capitulating, right? They were capitulating. Like, they were drawing up surrender documents. They were basically saying, like, yeah, war over. Let's go. Here's the surrender documents. Nukes. We're irrational people. Yeah, we're definitely irrational people. We're on the side of good, for sure. We're on the side of good. The U.S. was training Chinese fighter jets. Man, the U.S. just can't. They just can't stop, eh? All right, let's move on from this. As predicted, what was it? It was 2 days ago. Cases were 1,400. We were told that they were going to double every 3 days. Well, that's almost a doubling. That's almost a doubling from 1,400 to 2,400. Like, line go up. Stay safe out there, guys. Get vaccinated. Wear your mask. Wash your hands. Right? Like, I don't know what else to tell you. Like, here in Ontario, it is full-scale abandonment. Like, we just, like, the Ford administration is just not talking about it. Right? They're just not talking about it. They're doing, like, very small, real, almost, like, insignificant sort of stuff. And I wonder, like, is it going to, like, when we hit 10,000 cases, is that when we're going to start taking it seriously? I don't think so. I think the Ford administration's checked out. Like, I think they're checked out. That they have decided that it's over. We are no longer going to respond to this. We're just going to move on with the plunder. That's what the Ford administration really cares about. It's the plunder. Hawaii was granted statehood on August 21st, 1959. Oh shit, so it's not even like a state at this point. It's literally a colony. Like, it's literally like just a territory at best. So it's not even a state. Like, it's one of these ancillary. So it really is just a military base. Like, it's just like a lily pad, basically. USA, 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 right? And if it hadn't been, but this is just it, if it hadn't been Pearl Harbor, they would have done something else, right? It would have been some other thing, right? Because if they're using, like, this territorial lily pad that gets bombed by the Japanese as an excuse, well, the Japanese were likely hitting lots of targets, right? They were likely hitting lots of targets. And so the Americans, like, all it means is that the media just ramped up this one thing and the populace just got caught in a hysteria about it. And we're just like, we've been hit by the Japs. It's like, okay, but you could do this with, like, almost any target, right? Anything. Yeah, Japan was bombed into oblivion, but I still think it got off easy in comparison to Eastern Europe. Well, the big difference there, dude, is trench warfare. Like, once you start getting into trench warfare, like, you're literally destroying the land itself with trench warfare. And, like, and the constant, like, movement of troops and the movement of people, you destroy the earth itself. It becomes unusable. That's why what happened in Eastern Europe was so devastating, right? Because while Japan got bombed to shit, at least like the land was left like more like, sure, you blow it up, but like the land is okay. It's still usable. Not with trench warfare, like not with the type of warfare that happened throughout World War II, especially throughout the Eastern Bloc, where the Nazis invaded, and there was this line that was like pushed back and then pushed back. Like, not only did they experience the sweep of war once, they experienced it twice, and because of the German Blitzkrieg. Here's something I learned recently, right? The encirclement strategy by the Soviets was widely condemned by the Allies, and is one of these talking points that, like, oh, they're psychopathic, they kill their own people, they sacrifice everybody, and all this kind of stuff. But the German Blitzkrieg was a new technique that nobody knew what to do about, and it was based on momentum, right? That you get your tanks going and you just roll through, right? So the Soviets realized that the way to defeat the Blitzkrieg strategy is through encirclement. Never give the Germans the ability to get the momentum. Because if the Germans roll into Moscow, it's over, right? It's done. If the Germans fucking just like roll tanks into your production facilities, it's finished. The war is over. So you've got to entangle them. You've got to create a quagmire that they can't just get their tanks and drive them straight towards your shit. And so they created the encirclement strategy. And it completely worked. Were there losses? Yeah. Yeah. And the Allies would always critique them, being like, oh, but they didn't even get the land. It's like, but that's not the point. The point is to stop the Blitzkrieg. That's the point. And once the Germans pushed into the Soviet Union, well, the thing that wins the day for the Soviets is their increased productivity, because communist economies are more productive than capitalist economies, right? They're just better economies. They can produce more, they can produce faster, they're more resilient, and so the encirclement strategy was designed to buy time for the Soviet production machine, right? So that as the Nazis and the Soviets just bashed into each other, blowing up production, well, the Nazis would move in their smaller supplies, and the Soviets would move in their more supplies because they have a better economy. And in the end, that's what wins the day. Just like, and then finally it starts to push back. And it's once it starts to push back, that's when suddenly the Americans are like, we need to go in, white knight, heroes. Okay, buds, okay. Like, the system of capital is a death cult, and it's always been that way. They are all unrepentant psychopaths. Literally, just go read up on Churchill. Like, Churchill was a nightmare creature. Like, a nightmare creature. What do you guys say? What's Mock saying here? USSR lost 200 million troops. Germany lost 1/6 of the population. Most RAF bombings were in Eastern German cities like Dresden, which had no strategic value. USSR lost 20 million people. Japan had no denazification process and got to keep their emperor. Soviets probably lost 30 million in war, including civilians, yeah. Also, the factories were moved, yep, to the Ural Mountains. Nazis did not have long-range bombers that could go that far and come back to airfield, yeah. Like, the Soviets win this war, man. Like, this is something like, oh, communism has never worked in the history of communism. I'm like, except in World War II where they won. Like, think about how stacked that deck was against the Soviet Union. Like, really think about how stacked the deck was. And they won anyway. Like, incredible. It's an incredible story. An enormous communist success. Yeah, the distance between Berlin and Moscow is too long for Luftwaffe. Luftwaffe. Yeah. Once again, guys, please, for the love of God, wear your masks, wash your hands, get vaccinated, stay separated if you can. What a goddamn catastrophe. Soviets and Stalin were the only reason fascism was destroyed. I mean, Nazism was destroyed. Fascism won. Fascism won. Like, let's be real straight. Like, Nazism was destroyed. Nobody can walk around saying with any credibility that we are Nazis and we're proud of it, right? It's why it's such an enormous scandal what we're doing in Ukraine, where we're funding Nazi groups and Nazi groups are becoming normalized in Ukraine. Like it's really, really scary, right? But fascism itself won. Fascism won World War II, right? The American machine, right? Like America loves fascism. It uses fascists, like it installs fascist leaders all the time. I'm on the waiting list for my booster. Good for you, bud. Good for you. I am not eligible for the booster, I don't think, unless they recently opened it up. But see how it goes. Ontario needs immediate circuit breaker to blunt spread of Omicron, modeling suggests. This comes from Sean Davidson in CTV. Ontario could see intensive care capacity reach unsustainable levels in January without an immediate circuit breaker to blunt the spread of Omicron, modeling suggests. Experts with the Ontario Science Advisory Table released new data on Thursday to lay out the possible scenarios the province is facing. According to the modeling, the Omicron variant is set to become the dominant strain in the province this week. Without prompt intervention, ICU occupancy could reach unsustainable levels in early January, the modeling data says. According to the Ontario Science Advisory Table, increasing vaccination is not enough to slow this wave. The experts suggest an immediate circuit breaker, where people in Ontario cut their contacts by at least 50% and booster campaigns ramp up to 250,000 shots per day. High-quality masks, physical distancing indoors, improved ventilation, and increased access to rapid testing can help buy time for boosters to take effect and keep schools open, the modeling says. Without some type of circuit breaker, the data suggests cases could exceed 10,000 per day before Christmas. Although vaccines are less effective against Omicron infection, boosters can substantially increase protection, the modeling says. Even 2 doses likely provide strong protection against severe illness. The risk of severe illness is dramatically higher in the unvaccinated. According to the modeling, even if Omicron is 25% less severe than Delta, intensive care admissions will rise without new restrictions. Dr. Adelstein Brown, Dean of University of Toronto's Dalla Lena School of Public Health, said Thursday he believes Ontario does not need to close businesses or schools during a circuit breaker, but it will take serious restrictions that reduce contacts, he said. This will likely be the hardest wave of the pandemic. Brown said that while public health measures are needed to slow the spread of Omicron, they are not sustainable in the long run. On Thursday morning, health officials reported 2,421 infections in Toronto, as well as 9 deaths related to the disease. The last time Ontario's daily case count was this high was on May 15th, when 2,584 cases of the novel coronavirus were reported. As of today, 165 people are in intensive care units with the virus, 11 more than the previous day. The government says there are 600 intensive care beds available in Ontario. This is actually quite shocking. 600? There's only 600 intensive care beds available in Ontario? That seems real fucking low. That seems real fucking low, doesn't it? Doesn't it? Just seems real fucking low. 600? Seems low. Anyway. On Wednesday, Premier Doug Ford reintroduced a 50% crowd limit in venues with a capacity of more than 1,000, but declined to limit occupancy at restaurants and bars or introduce stricter limits for social gatherings, probably because he's an anti-vaxxer himself, right? Just listen to his daughter. But he also announced that all adults will be able to book a booster starting Monday, provided it's been at least 3 months since they received their second dose. A spokesperson for Health Minister Christine Elliott said Wednesday's additional public health measures would not have been factored into these modeling numbers. I mean, what additional public health? Like, literally, you're saying instead of 1,000 people, it's 500 people. Like, it's nothing. Today's modeling affirms that the best defense against the highly transmissible Omicron variant is dramatically accelerating the rollout of booster shots, Alexandra Hilkane said. The Chief Medical Officer of Health will continue to review data and evidence and act as necessary to limit transmission and protect the health and safety of Ontarians. So, like, literally, the Ford administration is doing fuck all. Like, just doing fuck all. Hey, Just JC, how you doing? Leaky boosters won't help. I'm pro-vax, but I understand this vaccine is insufficient. The numbers out of Israel show the same deaths and hospitalizations before as after the vaccines. Well, the numbers that I have seen show that the Omicron doesn't care if you're vaccinated in terms of transmission. It literally is just like, oh, you're vaccinated, I don't care. You're going to get it. Where it seems to really matter is hospitalization. That if you get it, you either don't experience symptoms, or if you do, they're quite diminished. And if you're unvaccinated, there's a much higher chance that you are going to need to be hospitalized. So, what a ridiculous time, dude. What a ridiculous time. Like, we straight up, the thing that's holding us back in this conversation, and they'll never have this conversation in the media, they'll never actually talk about this in serious ways, is that capitalism itself is the problem. That, like, a disease like this, like, we should shut everything down. Like, you talk about a circuit breaker, just like, okay, shut everything down. Oh, but then our economy. What about the wealth of billionaires, you guys? Even though they're making more money than ever. Like, right? Like, we're literally told that we need to sacrifice our lives and sacrifice our health and safety so that billionaires can get more money, which they're getting anyway. Right? Like, this has been the largest transfer of wealth from the poorest people to the wealthy in the history of the nation. It's been extravagant, what we've witnessed. Like, the extraction has been incredible. It's the dystopia we were always promised. Exactly. And, like, with the way that rent is going, with the way everything's going, like, our cities are going to get hollowed out. Like, people are just simply not going to be able to stay in the cities. And what you're going to end up with is you're going to end up with, like, empty cities that are basically owned by a billionaire, millionaire class, who have, like, a small group of servants that they keep at their disposal. It's like the true return to feudalism. And huge sections of the city are going to fall into disrepair. Huge sections. Women lost $800 billion in wealth in 2020 alone. Yeah, exactly. It's an extraction. Buck a beer, guys. Buck a beer. He may win again. Yep. Because, like, we're a very gullible, clueless people, like, here in Canada. Like, it's very, very obvious. Like, this is why they're doing this capitalist manifesto thing, right? Because, like, people want to believe that their system is actually beneficial or good somehow. And so these kinds of propaganda articles, which are just propaganda articles, like, there's no evidence, facts, or reason in these, right? They're just, today's video was all about the capitalist manifesto and how absurdly illiterate these people actually are. But it's effective propaganda. Yeah, but if we rely on man, we're a gold digger. Yeah, exactly. No, don't worry about feminist rant. I understand. Like, the history of women is one of slavery. Like, it is. Like, women have been property for most of human history. This and the reason why, especially the feminists, are getting very militant and very, like, dig their heels in and are trying really hard to get their voices heard is because this moment in time where they are not property, right? Where they are not explicitly tied to men is extremely new. And what is going on in the United States with the Roe v. Wade shit is fleeting. And everybody knows it, right? Well, and everybody who has a brain in their head knows it. Like, we can go back to a period of time where women are secondary citizens. Like, we can do that. It is completely possible. And like, literally, my grandmother was not allowed to vote. My mother was not allowed to have her own bank account, right? Like, these are serious, serious things that our society is, like, just now accepting that, oh yeah, women should be equal, right? Don't you think? Women should be considered equal in their validity to men, right? Don't you feel? And we're just, like, not actually doing that. So, yeah, I understand. I understand why women get really, like, I get it. Because it's just like, yeah. When we start to slide back the other direction, right, women will take it right on the chin, for sure. Will Freeland reinstate CERB? No. Absolutely not. They're working as hard as they can to dismantle the systems that they have, dude. Like, they're working as hard as they can to do that. They're absolutely not going to reinstate the CERB. Like, that's simply not going to happen. If anything, it'll go exactly the opposite direction. That the pathetic systems they've put in place in order to actually have a proper economy, they'll work as hard as they can to disconnect them. January 2nd, everything will shut down for 6 months. Nah, they're not going to shut shit down. Like, we should shut it down. If you ask me, we should shut down already. Like, we the populace should just simply stop showing up. Like, continue this great resignation. Continue it. Regression is possible and definitely on the table the way things are going. I mean, oddity, like, we're already in a period of regression, right? Like, the regression is, like, right in front of our face. Like, the assault on voting rights that's existing throughout the United States, the assault on women's rights, right? It's the definition of a regression. Yep, I had a manager admit they hire men first and pay them more because they have families to support. Yeah, because women don't have fucking families to support, right? Like, women are, like, I can't imagine why birth rates are down, guys. I can't imagine. Like, what do you think's going on with that, eh? What do you think's happening? Why do you think we're having less children? Like, oh man, we're not having enough children to actually replace the people who are dying. Oh, I can't imagine. Yeah, it turns out that if you turn your country into a fucking shithole where you abandon everybody, right, they can't have kids, right? And then your parents are sitting there being like, oh, but, you know, it always seems like it's not the right time. And it's like, no, dude, it is fucking not the right time. It is super not the right time. Like, I outright tell people, like, yeah, I am not interested in having kids because this is a shit show. Like, those kids are not going to be supported. Like, I'm not going to send them to a system of indoctrination to fill their heads with a bunch of fucking Western propaganda so that they can work for a system that's literally designed to destroy them. Like, no, I'm not doing anybody a favor. Like, if this place was nice and if things were nice, then yeah, obviously. Like, obviously I would feel fine bringing a kid into here and be like, hey, look, it's nice. But it isn't. It isn't. Like, the earth itself is nice, right? Our society sucks. Like, sucks huge dick. Enormous amount of balls. Like, sucks enormously. Ugh. 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 The Royal Canadian Mounted Police serves and protects fossil fuel CEOs. This one comes from Dylan Penner. It is well documented that systemic racism permeates the Royal Canadian Mounted Police to its core. The RCMP's actions in Wet'suwet'en territory are deeply rooted in that racism. Canada has a climate double standard. While land and water defenders face serious criminalization, repression, and police brutality, we're continuing to witness in Wet'suwet'en territory corporations, backed by the Royal Canadian Mounted Police, get away with breaking the law with impunity. The realities of this double standard have been highlighted by a groundbreaking report by the Yellowhead Institute on the use of injunctions. Yellowhead researchers found that 76% of injunctions filed against First Nations by corporations were granted. Meanwhile, 81% of injunctions filed by First Nations against corporations and 82% of those filed against the government by First Nations were denied. As the researchers write, That means 4 times out of 5, the courts side with corporations and government rather than indigenous claimants on land use cases. In Wet'suwet'en Territory, injunctions have been used to clear people off their land and expedite coastal GasLink pipeline construction. Shiri Pakner and Irena Sarek wrote in July 2020 that as solidarity blockades spread across the country last year, so too did the injunctions. There were 12 injunctions, all of them granted to suppress the protests, blockades, and occupations that arose in solidarity with Wet'suwet'en's struggle. As Pasternak and Sarek pointed out, this demonstrates that Canada is a smash-and-grab country for industry, revealing that historic incentives for colonialism are still alive and well today. Hard to imagine why the OECD is saying that our economy's in the shitter, eh? Like, hard to imagine. Instead of investing in our own citizenry, this is what we spend our money on. Like, it's just a black hole. And the beneficiaries of this, they don't take their money and trickle it back into the economy. They ship that shit offshore. Not hard to imagine why we're in the shitter economically. Not hard to imagine. Today, Coastal GasLink continues to break the law with impunity. Even though it still lacks key environmental authorization, the corporation is proceeding with the pipeline anyway. What's more, Coastal GasLink has been evicted from the territory in accordance with Wet'suwet'en law, but they refuse to leave. But the RCMP, with the support of the BC and federal governments, is siding with the pipeline. It's no wonder that the RCMP disregards the law in clearing Wet'suwet'en and other Indigenous peoples from their land. It is well documented that systemic racism permeates the RCMP to its core. The RCMP's action in Wet'suwet'en Territory are deeply rooted in that racism. As Pam Palmater recently pointed out, in December 2019, the United Nations Committee for the Elimination of Racial Discrimination called on Canada to stop construction of the Coastal GasLink pipeline, remove the RCMP and their weapons from Wet'suwet'en Territory, protect Indigenous peoples from violence, and to respect Indigenous peoples' right to free, prior, and informed consent. Despite this, she continues, weeks later the RCMP engaged in a campaign of forced removals and arrests along the pipeline route. Meanwhile, RCMP officers routinely break the law with impunity. The RCMP's use of exclusion zones in Wet'suwet'en Territory have been unlawful. And despite a BC court judge ordering the RCMP not to interfere with media access to ongoing protests like Fairy Creek in this past summer, the RCMP arrests journalists at the Wet'suwet'en camp anyway. The forced relocation of Indigenous peoples from their land is a violation of the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous People. And the RCMP violated the right to water of land defenders at the Wet'suwet'en's Coyote camp by intentionally eliminating the water supply. That the RCMP officers who drained the camp's water supply can be seen on the video footage visibly enjoying doing so is just one more example of the RCMP's racism in Wet'suwet'en Territory. The RCMP racism and resource extraction go hand in hand. As Gidimantine Checkpoint recently wrote, in the middle of a climate emergency, as highways and roads are being washed away and entire communities are being flooded and evacuated, the province has chosen to send busloads of police to criminalize Wet'suwet'en water protectors and to work as mercenary force for oil and gas. It's a whole other level of perverse that the BC and federal governments have supported yet another violent invasion of Wet'suwet'en Territory, the third in 3 years, when they should be focusing on dealing with the ongoing flooding disaster in the province, brought on by pipelines like Coastal GasLink. But we shouldn't be surprised. This is textbook shock doctrine used to advance corporate interests at the expense of people, communities, and the climate. The Wet'suwet'en people aren't only defending their land, they're defending our collective future from another pipeline that our climate can't afford. And we must continue to organize in solidarity with Wet'suwet'en until the Coastal GasLink pipeline is canceled, once and for all. I mean, you guys know me, right? We should be rounding these CEOs up and be putting them on trial for crimes against humanity. Like, really, really straightforward. Like, the CEOs of this I always forget the name of it, GasLink, Coastal GasLink, like these guys should be arrested, right? We should put them on trial. Justin Trudeau obviously should be arrested for this. Like these are crimes against humanity itself. Like this isn't like low level disagreements on policy. This is literally like, and my favorite part about the conversation is that the Liberals have told us that they actually care about this climate change issue when they clearly don't. Like 0% fucks given. They don't care at all. That anything they're pushing through is performative. That every time even the plastic ban, they're literally saying that we're going to delay the plastic ban now. So like even the legislation that they can tout as their success, they're delaying it. Like, and they'll just keep delaying, and they'll just keep delaying, and they'll just keep delaying. Because as long as this game of delay, acknowledge and delay, that's the strategy. Acknowledge, then delay, right? It's so that they can buy time for their criminal friends to make as much money as they can and destroy the whole place. And what's embarrassing about all of this, the high embarrassment for Canada, is that the OECD says that our economy is the worst. So this is a complete and total failure. This is an utter failure. That it is explicitly and only about wealth extraction. Our CMP pension fund is invested in the parent company of Coastal GasLink. Jesus Christ. Like, get the fuck out of here, right? Like, to serve and protect my ass. Ugh. Just gross. Just gross. Like, and we know, again, I bring up the the climate deception dossier, right? We know that they know, right? Like, we know that they know. We have the memos. We have the information. We know that they've been lying to us. We know. We're very, very aware of it. These people should be arrested. We should have a tribunal. They should have their assets stripped. And they should be imprisoned until the day they die. That's my position. These people are extreme criminals, as psychopathic and dangerous as the Nazis. And worse in many ways, because the Nazis didn't try to destroy all human life, right? Brutal. Just a brutal time to be alive. How are you guys doing out there? How are you guys doing out there? I feel like I'm blazing through this information today. Not a very big like news day, but a really big article day today. I'm gonna play that one later. Oh yeah. Here's a good TikTok that I'm gonna play. Come on.
No, for real, because if you're a wage laborer under capitalism, laziness on the job is the most rational thing you can do. Everyone knows profit equals revenue minus investment, right? And for capitalists, for business owners, that's easy because it's just money in, money out. But for wage workers, it's a lot more complicated because our take-home pay, our profit, equals our revenue, our wage times the amount of time we're at work, minus our investment, which is the time we spend working and the effort we put into work. Well, we don't get to decide what our wage is. Our boss decides that, so that one is immutable. We don't get to decide how much time we spend at work. Our boss decides that, so that variable is immutable. The only variable that we have any control over is effort. And in order to make this equation favor us as much as possible, to get our p-value the highest, we have to make effort as small as it can be in order to minimize the amount of investment to maximize our profit. So you putting in as little effort as possible at work, that's just you being a good participant in capitalism. And if your boss has a problem with that, maybe they should rethink their support of that system.
Right? You pretend to pay me, I pretend to work. Real straightforward. Real straightforward. And now the system is like this system is failing in serious ways. Like the work isn't even paying the rent any longer. Like why would anyone participate in this system? It doesn't even give you the base subsistence. Yeah, their wealth should be seized and spent on social welfare and the environment. Yeah. Like there's a real economy that we can get behind, right? Give people access to food and shelter, right? Start actually planting those trees, right? Like, start actually investing in environmental infrastructure, right? Plant those trees. Build up your nation. Do something for real. Like, do something for real. Like, if you were to gamify what's happening, right? Like, if you were to play a game of Civilization right now, right? Like, literally what we are doing is we are, like, creating, like, a great person. Like, okay? So, like, a great person comes out of the game. You've got your buildings and your civilization, and then you give all of your gold and all of your productivity and everything you've got to this great person so that they can do nothing of value whatsoever. Literally nothing of value whatsoever. Just like they sit there and they're just a black hole of productivity. Like, why would you do this? If you were playing a game and the game told you, yeah, you can build this thing and it's a black hole of productivity and money and resources and you get nothing. Why would you ever do this? It's exactly what we're doing. It's exactly what we're doing. And it's like, why do you think our economy's in the shitter? Like, for real, like, why do you think our economy's in the shitter? Doesn't take a fucking genius to figure this out. All right. Music time. Music time. I want to play 2020. Another month inside this car. The wage they pay me with don't get me very far. The chains I hold may break me down, but they don't scar. Can't even drink away my blues inside a bar. This year sucks. This year sucks. Can you blame a man for trying to give it up? And this year sucks. Another day won't help that pain inside your back. The days get harder, but it's too hard to keep track. They keep you tied before your soul opens a crack. God don't care what monkeys think about the facts, and this year sucks. This year sucks. Can you blame a man for trying to give it up, and this year sucks? So sit atop your pile of bones and bloody gold, and human sacrifice don't stop you being old. At least you'll die before the bomb you set explodes. We're gonna burn to death while doing what we're told, and this year sucks. This year sucks. Can you blame a man for trying to give it up, and this year sucks? It burns down anyway. It burns down anyway. It burns down anyway. It burns down anyway, yeah. Fuck, I love that song. That's a kick-ass song. got asked a question by my niece who's 5 years old. What's the world gonna be like when I'm grown? And I looked up at the crimson smoke-filled sky. I thought, what's the harm in telling one more lie? I said, everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? The burning sun won't leave a paper trail. Why work so hard if it's too big to fail? And what's the point of feeding this machine if it won't make the world in our dreams where everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets? You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? And I know one day my maker I will meet, when death's sweet kiss comes and sweeps me off my feet. I hope by then we've learned a little more. I'd like this place to be better than before, so everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice, and everybody's happy, and wouldn't that be nice? When everybody's safe, no one's living in the streets. You never need to worry if you're gonna get to eat. And Antarctica is covered in ice. Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Wouldn't that be nice? Antarctica is covered in ice. And I still believe that we can do it. Because it isn't a mystery. There's no confusion about how we get out of this. We don't need to invent anything. We don't need to create something. We don't need to think that hard about it. This place was a garden before we were even here. It was created as a sustainable system a perfect, ideal garden for us to grow and flourish in. We don't need to create something or do something. Quite the opposite. That the earth is quite capable, thank you very much, of healing itself. It's far more powerful than we are. It's far more powerful than we are. And if we want to be here to witness the miraculous force of the earth healing itself, all we have to do is stop. And what's embarrassing about this? We asked our grandparents to go to war and die, to sacrifice their lives, to sacrifice their time, to sacrifice everything, to go fight a war, to get into machines of death, to get into trenches, to carry around weapons, to get gassed, to be blown apart. And they went and they did it. They sacrificed everything for us. And we can't even stop playing with our toys. We're not asking anybody to sacrifice their life. We're not asking anybody to sacrifice their time. We're asking people to put their toys away. And we can't even do that. And yes, it will be difficult. And yes, we will be faced with challenges. But the challenges that we will face when we finally stop, when we finally come to our senses, when we finally snap out of this mass hysteria and the mad pursuit for superpowers, the challenges we will face upon stopping will look like a drop in the bucket compared to the vengeance of the raging sun burning our civilization to ash and dust, which is the destiny we are laying out in front of us. The solution could not be easier. Stop. And we know who needs to stop. Did you know that every single time we shoot one of these fucking Jeff Bezos rockets into space, it's the same amount of CO2 emissions as 1 billion people produce in their entire lifetimes? Like, when I am saying we need to stop playing with toys, I'm being very serious. These penis rockets, these yachts that can contain other yachts, these fucking helicopters, private jets, these are toys for the rich. These fucking NFT cryptocurrency bullshit, these are toys. These are childish garbage toys. And our society would be better off without them. Every single one of those cryptocurrencies is a crime against humanity, is a crime against nature itself. And if you're genuinely going to look me in the face and say anything other than that, then I think you're a child. A little baby that doesn't understand anything about the world or the power of the universe. Lytton burnt to the ground. It burnt to the ground so fast that they couldn't even get the fire trucks out of the fire hall to respond. The fire trucks burnt in the fire hall. That's how fast Lytton burnt down. That is the fate of Canada and the rest of the world. To put it in fun biblical terms, God promised that he would not wipe out the world again with a flood. He didn't say fuck all about a wildfire. And these deluded liberals, these unbelievable deluded liberals, these Karens and these Kens that literally think they can negotiate with the fucking sun. When they turn their taps on in order to get reprieve from the boiling heat as the air snaps and crackles around them, they will find that the water itself has boiled before they pass out from heat exhaustion and then bake to death in the unrelenting sun. We are fucking around with forces that will wipe us out and will not miss us when we're gone. Just stop. It isn't hard to do. The dominationists are giddily guiding us to the apocalypse to bring about the second coming. This isn't conspiracy. Yeah, there's a bit of that too, right? Like, if you genuinely believe that there's a second coming of Jesus Christ happening, then all of the signs of the apocalypse, of these end times, are actually good. Because at the end, Jesus Christ comes down and obviously rewards you as a stalwart follower, right? And let's be straight about how it is in modern America as a white person, right? That Jesus is going to go and he's going to go destroy the evil Muslims and destroy the Chinese and destroy all these guys and reward all the white people, right? Put the black people back in their place of subservience where they belong. Like, and if you genuinely believe, as people like Mike Pence, by the way, like Mike Pence, former vice president of the United States, literally believes that the apocalypse will usher the return of Jesus Christ. Literally. Like, literally they believe this. And so why prevent the apocalypse if the end of the apocalypse is something good, as far as you're concerned, right? There's a reason I call this a death cult. And in secular terms, right, someone like Jeff Bezos, for example, like Bezos doesn't have that Christian desire, but what he does have is the arrogance of his own self. That once you become a psychopathic narcissist, the way that Jeff Bezos obviously is, you look at the world as something to be controlled and dominated. And the unfortunate reality for all of us and for a man like Bezos is that the rules of the universe state that you die, even if you're Jeff Bezos. And if you're a psychotic narcissist like Jeff Bezos, then you are going to try to destroy the thing that is killing you. Right? Because, of course, I'm bigger than the universe itself. I'm Jeff Bezos. And so this climate change destruction is happening in part because these psychopathic narcissists refuse to subserviate themselves to any force, even their own creator, and will seek to destroy it as it takes them out. Not one media outlet will report on Bill C-223. If it was any other issue than basic income, it would be all over the news. We need to dismantle the oligarchy. We need to dismantle capitalism. Yeah. And the only way we can do that now is by collectively surrounding the halls of power. It's literally the only thing left for us. There is no reason to even negotiate with the liberals and the conservatives. There's no reason to believe that electoralism will help us. It hasn't so far for decades now. Like, there's literally no reason. Yeah, the continued myth that there's nothing to be done about our predicament, accepting the end of all things. Yeah, And it's so stupid because the solutions are obvious, right? Like, obvious. Like, oh, hey, I keep lighting matches and the house keeps lighting on fire. Stop lighting matches. Like, real straightforward shit. Like, real straightforward shit. Right? If you had someone you were living in your apartment with and they just could not help themselves but light the house on fire, you'd really start asking yourself, like, hey, why are you lighting the house on fire? And eventually you would get to the point where, okay, we got to restrain you. Right? Like, we've got to restrain these people. And they're not responding to us politically. They're not responding to us economically. They're not going to respond to us rationally. Right? They are caught in a hysteria brought about by a capitalist death cult. All that is left for us, is to surround the halls of power. That's it. And every single time I go out and protest with Isabella, there's more people. Every single time. It isn't much longer. Until eventually there's going to be 200, 300, 400, and eventually thousands and thousands of people. It will happen. And eventually we will start to realize, oh, we could just walk over to the parliament and surround it. Which is exactly what we should do. Full-scale encampments, full-scale, all of that shit. We have to surround the halls of power. We have no alternative. They've given us no alternative. There's nothing else that we can do. They're not responding to us. They're not responding rationally because they've lost their senses because they're caught in a mass hysteria. Like, on the same level as the Salem witch trials. The same idea, right? Just a mass hysteria. People going around literally trying to find out if people are witches. It's a mass hysteria. And our mass hysteria surrounds superpowers. That I take a look at films like The Avengers, right? All that superhero stuff as an aspect of the hysteria. Because we're supposed to worship these guys. Not because they have any moral center. Not because they're right. Each and every one of them is just an aspect of neoliberal domination and control. Right? Fighting like cartoonified versions of Muslims. No, what we're supposed to do is worship them because they have superpowers. That's it. Like, it's the only leg they have. And once the populace snaps out of this mass hysteria, the superheroes will go away. Because the only reason why we like watching them at all is because they fuel the hysteria. And it is a hysteria. Like, there are so many things that we could do differently. Like, there's an almost limitless amount of things that we could change. Like, walk down to Dundas Square. Walk into Times Square. You've got all these signs lit up. Right? How much money do you think that costs? How much money do you think that costs a day to keep those signs lit up? Right? You think that money would be useful for literally anything else? Like literally anything else? But such is the nature of the hysteria. And it is a hysteria. So I'm going to play this one. This is from the great and powerful Linda McQuaig, whose articles I've read on this channel. Here she is, abolish billionaires. Sounds good to me. Let's hear what she has to say.
As you know, a billionaire is someone who's really rich. But do you know just how rich? Consider this. Imagine you received $1 every second. After a minute, you'd have $60. After an hour, you'd have $3,600. Not bad. Now imagine if you kept receiving money at that spectacular rate all day and all night. In 12 days, you'd be a millionaire. But to become a billionaire, you'd have to keep receiving money at that rate for 32 years. Canada's richest person, David Thompson, heir to the Thompson media fortune, has $53 billion. So at that same rate, $1 every second, all day and all night, how long would it take Thompson to count his money? 1,680 years. So if David Thompson had started counting his fortune back in 330 AD, he'd just be finishing up now. It's hard to believe, but billionaires pay almost no tax on their fortunes. Unlike the rest of us, they can avoid income tax entirely. Their wealth is typically in huge stock holdings which grow in value every year. If they were to sell those stocks, they'd have to pay income tax on the gain. But instead, billionaires borrow against their own wealth. That means they use their wealth as collateral to get bank loans that allow them to live as lavishly as they want without triggering any tax. That's why we need a wealth tax. NDP leader Jagmeet Singh has proposed a 1% annual tax on fortunes over $10 million. People with less than that wouldn't be affected at all. Even such a small wealth tax of 1% a year could raise $10 billion a year, enough to fund a lot of affordable housing, public transit, and climate action. There's always been a strong case for a wealth tax, but the pandemic has made it even stronger. As ordinary workers have suffered, the fortunes of Canada's billionaires have soared by more than $80 billion. When COVID struck, the Weston family, Canada's third richest, announced they were giving their frontline employees at Loblaws an extra $2 an hour in pandemic pay. Newspapers cast the action as a generous show of solidarity in the face of the deadly scourge. But several months later, as the pandemic raged on, the family's generosity was exhausted. The Westons terminated the extra pay. Meanwhile, Loblaws' profits soared, adding $4.6 billion to the family's wealth in just the first year of the pandemic. That exceptional good fortune must have softened the hearts of the Westons. While not reinstating pandemic pay, they gave their employees a one-time appreciation bonus, awarding a part-time Loblaws cashier an extra $25 for the year. And it wasn't even Christmas. The trouble with billionaires isn't just that they hoard so much money, but that all that wealth makes them immensely powerful. They've become so powerful that they effectively have a veto over our democratic choices. What's blocking action on the climate crisis, for instance, is the most powerful set of billionaire interests on Earth, big oil. That power was illustrated when Justin Trudeau spent $13 billion of Canadian taxpayer money to bail out the struggling Trans Mountain pipeline project in 2018. By buying that pipeline, the Trudeau government is enabling big oil to massively expand their export of the oil sands, a terrible setback for climate action. A wealth tax would be a vital tool in curbing the power of billionaires. While the 1% wealth tax proposed by Jagmeet Singh would be a good start, we'll need something much more robust. We need something on the scale of 15 or 20% targeted at the very top to actually reduce fortunes and ultimately eliminate billionaires. About a century ago, the U.S. Supreme Court Justice Louis Brandeis made an insightful prediction. We can have democracy in this country, or we can have great wealth concentrated in the hands of the few, but we can't have both. His prediction could be updated today to reflect how much higher the stakes are now. So we have to choose between billionaires and a livable planet. I mean, is it really such a hard choice?
And incidentally, that choice, the Liberals actually say. They outright will tell you. Like Chrystia Freeland said it, Justin Trudeau said it, livable planet, billionaires. They've actually said this out loud, and they treat this as if it's a choice. Or as if it's something that needs to be compromised on. I actually feel like Linda is very nice to the billionaires, right? Saying we'll deflate their fortune over time. I literally, like, if I was the Prime Minister of Canada, I would set 100% over 10 million immediately. And if they complained, I'd be like, get the fuck out of here. I don't give a fuck about you at all. Like, at all. Go get a job. Like, get the fuck... And I would begin nationalizing all their shit. Like, get the fuck out of here. Like, you're done. Conversation's over. And of course I would arrest them and put them on trial in a tribunal, like a climate change tribunal. Like, these guys are criminals. Like, mass-scale, huge Nazi-level criminals. Like, they should have their fortunes stripped. They should do jail time. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. And I mean, and I'm getting to the point now where I think if you disagree with that, I think you're fucking nuts. Like, oh, so like I could just walk up to you, beat the shit out of you, steal your money, fuck your wife and walk away, right? Like, that's completely fine. Like, yikes. Like, yikes. And if they set themselves up properly, they borrow as a corporation and declare their payments against any tax they may be required to pay, thus even further reducing their owing amounts. Yeah. Like, they own the system. Like, once you are a billionaire, you become an owner, right? And if you own the society, you're not gonna pay for anything, right? Like, you own it, right? Like, and there's just like a little part of me that's just like, what do we think the breaking point actually is for us? Is there going to be one? Is there actually going to be a point where the populace says, oh, this is enough? Like, this is enough. Like, is there actually a point where the populace is actually going to snap out of this? Like, what is it? What is the breaking point? I'm not sure. I don't know. Like, is it going to take like the city of Kamloops? Yeah, Amazon got a $28 million tax refund in 2018. Like, what a fucking joke, right? Like, what a fucking joke. Canada has long been an accomplice in America's imperialist wars, by Eve Angler, from The Jacobin. Rooted in Cold War anti-communism, the military alliance between the US and Canada is responsible for bloody conflicts around the globe. An anti-war movement in Canada would challenge the strategic pact between the two nations. The current military alliance between the United States and Canada has its origin in the interwar years. In 1938, then US President Franklin Roosevelt pledged that his nation would not stand idly by if domination of Canadian soil was threatened by any other empire. His opposite number, William King, responded in kind. We too have our obligations as a good friendly neighbor, and one of them is to see that our own country is made as immune from attack or possible invasion as we can reasonably be expected to make it. And that should be the occasion ever arise, enemy forces should not be able to pursue their way either by land, sea, or air to the United States from Canadian territory. In the years that followed, the two nations went on to strengthen their political and military ties, founding the Permanent Joint Board on Defense in 1940, the Military Cooperation Committee in 1946, the North American Aerospace Defense Agreement, and Command in 1958. It is, however, hard to shake the impression that within this alliance, Canadian forces' roles is largely that of an appendage to their superpower southern neighbor. A devoted and servile ally. In the South China Sea, the United States' most recent military theater, its ally to the north has been a willing escalator of tensions with China. In October, HMCS Winnipeg joined a U.S. destroyer deliberately sailing through the Taiwan Strait. The military exercise, a provocation to Beijing, was in keeping with the Canadian Navy's many international operations alongside its U.S. counterpart. Since the 2003 US-led invasion of Iraq, a small detachment of Canadian soldiers continue to serve under US command. Operating out of the Prince Sultan Air Base near Riyadh, Saudi Arabia, the CF are in charge of a team of spy planes in one of the many little-discussed Canadian military deployments around the world. Under the Pentagon's direction, the Canadian military has been setting up a network of international bases over the past decade. As part of the Two Nations initiative to project combat power, Canada has established lily pads, small military bases, in Kuwait, Senegal, and Jamaica. Negotiations are currently undergoing with Singapore, Germany, Tanzania, and South Korea over the possibility of establishing small bases within these nations. I know, bud, lily pads, right? Military lily pads always set Milo off. Canadian Special Forces in particular have a long history of collaboration with their U.S. peers. Under joint commander with the United States during World War II, Canada's 1st Special Forces unit consisted of 900 Canadians and their same number Americans. The Devil's Brigade, officially known as the Canadian-American 1st Special Services Force, carried out sabotage missions and organized resistance in North Africa, Italy, and southern France. Closer to home, the two North American nations deployed their respective special operations forces to rescue NGO and church workers allegedly under threat from Colombia's Revolutionary Armed Forces, guerrillas in the late 1990s. In the late 2001, 40 members of Canada's Joint Task Force, alongside its US and British counterparts, invaded Afghanistan. The Canadian military has stood side by side with its neighbor to the south in almost every major conflict in which the US has participated. Tens of thousands of Canadians fought in Korea, Iraq, Yugoslavia, Afghanistan, and Libya. Between 2014 and 2016, Canadian fighter jets joined the US bombing campaign over Iraq and Syria. Peacekeeping for Warhawks. Canada's most well-known peacekeeping mission was instigated at the behest of Washington. The United States opposed the British, French, and Israeli invasion of Egypt in 1956. Canada led a UN force designed to extradite London from a war that sparked tension within NATO between the former imperial power and the new global hegemon. In the early 1960s, Canadian peacekeepers played an important role in the US. Belgarian assassination of Congolese independence leader Patrice Lumumba. In February 2004, 30 JTF-2 commandos took control of the airport in Port-au-Prince. From there, elected Social Democratic Haitian President Jean-Bertrand Aristide was kidnapped in his words, onto a plane by U.S. Marines and deposited in the Central African Republic. 500 Canadian troops would go on to occupy Haiti as part of a U.S.-instigated UN mission that installed an interim government led by Gerard Letroy, following a violent coup. I'm just blugging all these names. Oh my God. Canada has hundreds of military accords with the United States. According to Canada's Department of National Defence, there are 80 treaty-level agreements, more than 250 memoranda of understanding, and 145 bilateral forums on defence. Between the two countries' militaries, the most important of these binational military accords is the North American Aerospace Defense Command, NORAD. NORAD grants the U.S. commander at its Colorado headquarters operational control of an element of Canadian forces in Canada. Created to defend the two countries from an invasion by Soviet bombers coming from the north, NORAD's existence owes itself to the Cold War politics of the mid-century. Outlasting the Soviet Union, NORAD's systems supported the 2003 invasion of Iraq and U.S. bombing in Afghanistan, Libya, and Somalia. And yet 3 planes got through on September 11th, 2001. Interesting. Just throwing that shit in there. The CF purchases weapons to fight with their U.S. counterparts. In 2002, Ray Henault, Canada's Chief of Defence Staff, noted that maintaining interoperability with the U.S. is key to the future relevance to the CF. The government's 2017 defense policy statement cited the importance of interoperability. Holy cow, is this the word? Interoperability. Interoperability. Oh my goodness. What a word. With U.S. and NATO forces at least 19 times. At its most basic, interoperability means the ability for military forces to act together seamlessly because their doctrines, protocols, and equipment are compatible. An ideal accomplice. Canada's large landmass and research capacities have been of significant benefit to the U.S. war machine. In the 1950s and 60s, the DND funded and supported psychiatric research that the CIA used to refine torture techniques, which it practiced across the globe. The Center for International and Defense Policy at Queen's University in Kingston helped turn the naturally occurring toxins in shellfish into a weapon. Canada then supplied these poisons to the U.S. Military Biological Weapons Center at Fort Detrick in Maryland. In the 1970s, the CIA attempted to kill Cuban President Fidel Castro with a nearly untraceable pill consisting of this same shellfish toxin. In the 1965, the U.S. Air Force jets dispersed biological weapon stimulants over Defense Research Establishment Suffield in Canada's Prairie province of Alberta. DRES was important to U.S. research during the war in Vietnam, and the ability to test out weapons on Canadian soil helped to advance the United States war effort. As famed investigative reporter Seymour Hersh has explained, Suffield has become colossally important to the CWB, chemical biological weapons, people here in the last year. Ever since the uproar came out over tests within the United States in the summer of 1969, it's a known thing in Washington that Suffield has become the U.S. prime testing area. In the 1980s, DRES received a boost from the Reagan administration's renewed interest in CBWs. On the other side of the country, the U.S. tested Agent Orange and other defoliants used to decrease food supplies to areas supporting the anti-colonial insurgency in Vietnam. A 1968 U.S. Army memorandum titled Defoilation Tests in 1966 at Base Gagetown, New Brunswick, Canada, explained why Canada, in particular, was such a suitable ally to the United States. The North American nation had at its disposal large areas similar in density to those of interest in Southeast Asia. Subsequently, in March 1965, the Canadian Ministry of Defence offered Crops Division large areas of densely forested land for experimental test of defoliant chemicals. U.S. military research designed these chemicals to target similar vegetation densities to those of temperate and tropical areas, such as Southeast Asia. The U.S. Navy staffs and funds a testing facility on the east side of Vancouver Island in British Columbia. Canadian Forces, maritime experimental and test ranges is largely used by U.S. nuclear-powered and U.S. nuclear weapons capable submarines. In the 1990s, U.S. submarines fired thousands of torpedoes at the Nanoose Bay facility. The soft seabed allows them to retrieve expensive torpedoes. Having endorsed nuclear weapons-free legislation, BC's New Democratic Party government sought a review of Nanoose Bay's environmental impacts in the late 1990s. In response, Ottawa expropriated CFMETR's land, in which was the first hostile expropriation of provincial property since the early 20th century. The Federal Court of Canada ultimately ruled against the federal government. Washington regularly pushes Ottawa to increase military spending. Paul Cellucci, U.S. ambassador to Canada in the early aughts, revealed that upon his appointment in 2002, his only instruction was to advance this directive. During a 2016 speech to Canadian Parliament, President Barack Obama called on the federal government to increase its military spending. In 2018, President Donald Trump sent Prime Minister Justin Trudeau a letter requesting that Canada improve its military preparedness. If the history of U.S.-Canadian relationships tells us anything, It is that we are the main aim of the alliance between the two nations is to prepare for imperialistic military intervention abroad. Canadian military power exists as a prop for the United States' global military supremacy. Breaking the close ties between these nations will go one step towards undermining the dominance of the world's global hegemon. It will come to the point where Canada, we will have to beg the United States to stop this madness. That we will come to the point here in Canada where we will be essentially prostrated on our faces before the American Empire, begging them to come to their senses. That the American military alone is, with its pollution, is capable of destroying us. And it would be a big wake-up call for Americans if their strongest allies started to abandon them. The breaking point will be next year when half the effing country is homeless. Yeah, we'll see. Canadians are extremely gullible. Like, extremely gullible. Canadian military builds a mosque on military base in Alberta, worrying many Muslim Canadians. Yeah. 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 That does sound worrying. Kitchener Green MP Mike Morris has been encouraging the Liberal government to follow through with its commitment to implement the Canada Disability Benefit, which would supplement the Ontario Disability Support Program. Petition of support, more details. The only reason I wanted to bring this up is just to state, again, as cleanly as possible, we give less money to the disabled than the Americans do. Like, there's this odd narrative that exists in the Canadian consciousness that gets to say, like, well, at least we're not as bad as the Americans. Yep. In many ways, we're worse. Like, at least America has this sort of attitude of like, fuck yeah, America. Love it or leave it. Fuck you, right? So it's sort of reprehensibility is like worn on its sleeve. And Canadians have this... Canadians are duplicitous in their dealings, right? That we try to deceive people into believing that we are nice, right? And it's functioned, right? That there is this sort of attitude amongst the world that is steadily depleting, but there is this attitude in the world that, oh, Canadians are so nice and friendly, right? And you can see how this strategy is working for the Liberals, right? That the Liberals' strategy was to be nice and to acknowledge, right? To acknowledge. And then ultimately pull out the dagger and stab you in the back, right? So that in my view, is how Canadians are. We are the epitome of like the friendly, smiling face with the poisoned, hidden dagger. That's how Canada operates in the world. Like, and it's very effective. It's very effective. Nearly $30 billion in GTA housing linked to money laundering. Isn't that fun? Isn't that fun? Isn't this whole free market capitalism thing really working out? $30 billion of our housing is just for money laundering. And that's only here in Toronto. Absolutely wonderful, eh? Can't imagine why there's a housing crisis. Can't imagine. I wonder if they're actually going to give us like a percentage. Like, what percentage of our housing market is that, do you think? Here, let's just read this. It's not a very long article. As housing prices in the Greater Toronto Area continue to climb to unattainable heights, pushing the dream of home ownership even further out of reach for many, it's being said that a major contributor to the rising home prices in the region is money laundering. However, billions of dollars in real estate transactions in the GTA alone can be tied to money laundering. Lady, you don't need to say however here. Ainsley Smith. This isn't a however, right? It's being said that a major contributor to the rising home prices in the region is money laundering. However implies a contradiction. This isn't a contradictory statement, Ainsley. And who's your editor? God, people should hire me for this shit, man. Anyway, billions of dollars in real estate transactions in the GTA alone can be tied to money laundering, according to a 2019 joint study titled Opacity, Why Criminals Love Canadian Real Estate and What to Do About It. The study, completed by Transparency International Canada and the End Snowwashing Coalition, found multiple risk indicators in the GTA real estate, including that different corporations acquired nearly $30 billion in local housing between 2008 and 2018, the majority of which was privately owned with no information on beneficial owners provided. During that same time period, the study also found that at least $35 billion, 25%, in residential mortgages in the GTA were provided by unregulated lenders with no anti-money laundering reporting obligations. The study also revealed that $9.8 billion in GTA housing was acquired by companies through cash or non-financed purchases during this period, much of it bypassing statutory anti-money laundering checks on the sources of funds and beneficial owners. It's almost as if it's structured this way. It's almost as if it's supposed to be this way. James Cohen, Executive Director, Transparency International Canada, says a publicly accessible land ownership transparency registry in Ontario would be a crucial tool to fight these problems. To tackle money laundering on a national level, the federal government indicated in its budget last April that a new database with details on beneficial land owners is being planned and is expected to be complete by 2025. Push back to 30, push back to 35. British Columbia has already announced a land owner transparency registry, which has been touted as a critical anti-money laundering tool. According to the BC government, it will be publicly searchable registry of information about beneficial ownership of land in the province. Beneficial landowners are those who own or control land indirectly, such as through a corporation, partnership, or trust. Doesn't sound very beneficial, honestly. However, here you go. You used however correctly. Ontario could be the second province to crack down on fraud in the housing market. No, that's not. Forget it. Last week, Ontario NDP housing critic Jessica Bell and MPP Butila Carpacci in proposed new legislation calling the Anti-Money Laundering in Housing Act. The anti-money laundering bill is intended to make homes affordable by ending the practice of numbered companies buying up swaths of homes while shielding themselves from transparency. The bill requires corporations, trusts, and partnerships that own real estate to disclose individual owners, with failure to comply resulting in fines of up to $100,000. I can't believe this doesn't already exist, right? Like, I'm shocked to hear this. I'm shocked to hear that there isn't already legislation on the books to require corporations to do this. Like, that should have existed since, like, the fucking 1910s. Like, what are you fucking talking about? The proposed bill would build on beneficial ownership transparency developments brought forward by the Ontario government in Bill 43 that proposed amendments to the Business Corporations Act as part of the Fall Economic Statement. However, Bell says the Fall Economic Statement falls short because minor changes to address this big problem shield the identity of beneficial owners and open massive loopholes that trusts, partnerships, and foreign corporations can easily exploit to dodge taxes or launder money. While individual buyers are required to publicly register the property they own, investors can set up numbered corporations, trusts, and partnerships that are allowed to buy and sell property anonymously, making Canada a global hotspot for money laundering and fraud, said Carpacci, adding, Doug Ford has done nothing to crack down on shady real estate deals, including money laundering, tax evasion, and rampant housing speculation. He's probably benefiting from it. He's probably taking a cut. Like, Doug Ford is a shitty person. Everyone deserves the chance to own a home, yet rising prices and investor-driven speculation continue to operate as substantial obstacles, stopping many Ontarians from being able to do so. If we want more of Ontario's homes to be affordable for people and families, we need to take action to stop anonymous investors from outbidding families who just want to own one home, said Bell. Waka walk, 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 walk. It's almost like the laws are designed to be fraudulent. Huh? Have you noticed this? Have you noticed how all of the laws are being designed to be fraudulent, to be exploited? Like, literally just reading this one article, I walk away from it being like, oh, it's designed to be money laundering. Like, that's the point of it. Like, the system is supposed to be used as a money laundering system. Oh, Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love. Yeah. Canada is violating international law by selling arms to Saudi Arabia. Like, Canada has no right to talk about human rights. Like, we don't have a leg to stand on. We sell arms to the Saudi Arabian, like military. And what are the Saudis using it for? To commit a genocide. We've exported nearly $7.8 billion. Like $7.8 billion in arms. Like, and it's done against international law. Like, we just don't give a fuck. We just don't give a fuck at all. And it's just like, anytime any Canadian newspaper, especially the National Post, it's the main offender, gets all like, China has so many human rights abuses, I'm just like, shut the fuck up. Like, shut the fuck up. How about you start reporting on this shit? How about you start reporting on the fact that we sell weapons to Saudi Arabia? Huh? You fucking losers. Just fucking unbelievable propagandists and hacks. But I mean, what do you expect? What do you expect from these guys? These guys are publishing like the Capitalist Manifesto. Like, this guy, Michael Higgins. This is unbelievable to me, dude. So, the Capitalist Manifesto. How many millions of people escaped poverty, lived longer, and got TV? It's an 18-minute read. An 18-minute read. Like, look at this thing. I'm not going to read it. I'm not going to read it out loud. So don't worry about that. Like, you can see just by the pictures, though. Like, you're getting into, like, the Mongolians, right? The Chinese, the French period. Here's some Roman shit, right? All of this history, all of this stuff. You know what he doesn't actually talk about? You know what he doesn't actually talk about? Slavery. He straight up does not talk about slavery. Straight up does not talk about genocide. Does not talk about any of this kind of stuff. Attributes all of the wealth that we have. Guilt is not the spirit of capitalism, he said in an interview. Innovism, or innovation, entrepreneurship, risk-taking is. McCloskey said she saw every reason for the capitalist spirit, innovism, to continue in the future, leading to the eradication of human poverty in 50 years. Let's not fall back into the arms of an ignoramus daddy with authoritarian taste, she has written. Let us innovate to save the wretched of the earth. Like, this is delusion. High-level delusion. Capitalism makes its wealth by enslaving populations, stealing resources from other populations, including land, while committing a genocide against the people who are standing in its way. That's how capitalism has always operated. That is the backbone of how it accrues wealth. That it goes to war with weaker nations, plunders them, and brings the plunder back home, and then we're told, oh, it's innovation. Like, the level of delusion that exists within this 18-minute read document is intense. Like, world population living longer, yeah, that's absolutely the truth. Undeniable, right? That, oh yeah, the world population is living longer. Yeah, when did we start keeping track? Oh, the 60s. Oh, what event occurred before the 60s do you think would decline? Like, what do you think there was an event that happened right before the 60s that made sure that people lived not as long? Oh, was it those capitalist wars, right? World War I and World War II. Do you think the capitalist wars had something to do with that? Do you think the enslavement of the African continent and the enslavement of the Indian people had something to do with it? Of the idea that living was less? Kind of weird that you're starting the line at like this at 1960, right? I'd be interested to see, like, hey, were living standards better when there wasn't a world war caused by capitalists? Right? That's my absolute favorite thing, by the way, is that somehow in the conversation of capitalism, World War II is just considered like it's just an event that happened. Like it's like leaves fall down in the fall. Like that's how they look at it. That it's just like, yeah, World War II, right? Oh no, that wasn't. And one of these guys actually literally treats Hitler as if he wasn't a capitalist. Like Hitler and Mussolini and all those guys were capitalists, right? Mein Kampf is a capitalist document. It's as capitalist as The Wealth of Nations is. Like Adam Smith's The Wealth of Nations. Like Mein Kampf and The Wealth of Nations are equivalent documents. One is an economics document and the other is a cultural document. They're both capitalist documents. Yeah, but it's okay if we sell arms to Saudi Arabia. We'll take 3 refugees from Yemen. Yeah. And then this one, outright this guy admits capitalism is for blah, 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 blah. Yeah. But this final advantage also reflected liberal capitalism's inherent weakness. Its neutral stance on matters of virtue and lack of singular definition of the good life made it somewhat unsatisfying for certain audiences. Isn't that a nice thing to say? I know, buddy. I know, buddy. I know. The wind. A singular definition of the good life made it somewhat unsatisfying for certain audiences. That's a really, really shitty way to say, yeah, slaves don't like being enslaved. Right? Oh, you don't consider being enslaved part of the good life, right? Capitalism was a superior means of allocating scarce resources in the economy through slavery and genocide, and could help make us rich through slavery and genocide, but it couldn't tell what individuals ought to value or how they ought to live, because it's an amoral system, right? Well, it's an immoral system. It literally says that greed is good, and that just pursue profit at all. It's like the ideology of the Ferengi. And then my favorite, like, this guy's conclusion is so hilarious. Like, for real, this guy's like, his conclusion is, but of course capitalism is by no means perfect, but that's the wrong standard. The proper question is, which ideas and institutions are most likely to boost living standards and enable a multiplicity of viewpoints about the good life to coexist free from coercion or persecution? All you've got to do to reach the conclusion that capitalism is the winner, if those are the bounds of the conversation, is ignore its entire history. That's all you have to do. If you ignore the entire history of capitalism and how it's operated in the rest of the world, right? If you ignore the experience of any other culture other than white culture, you can conclude that the ideas and institutions that are most likely to boost living standards and enable a multiplicity of viewpoints about the good life to coexist free from coercion and persecution, well, if you ignore the entire history of capitalism and the experience of all the non-white nations that it has inflicted itself upon, you can conclude that it's capitalism. Like, this overt white supremacy and overt whitewashing that exists within the National Post is pretty fucking brutal. Pretty fucking brutal. And then my absolute favorite, comes from Matthew Lau in the Financial Post. The Capitalist Manifesto: socialism not only makes people worse off, it also makes them worse. And this is just like the height of illiteracy. Like, this is... I gotta read this one out loud, guys, because it's just... like, this is how deluded they are. The ongoing decline of economic freedom and the rise of socialism in Canada is a march towards absurdity. First line, you throw your intellectual credibility right out the window. The decline of economic freedom? How? How has there been a decline in economic freedom? What? By what? By who? Who doing what? And the rise of socialism. What the fuck are you talking about? Like what the absolute fuck are you talking about? This goes in with the same kind of diluted talk that like Trudeau is a socialist, right? Okay. Well, you're looking at me like you want to come up. Do you want to come up? Do you want to come up? We got 20 minutes left on the cast. Do you want to be part of it? You want to say hi to the people? It's like I got a puppet. Like I'm gonna come up with like a puppet and be like, hey everybody. But he's a puppet that doesn't like to cooperate. Okay. The sure results of this trend are excess poverty and moral decay. So blame the poverty and decay that's happening in the society on the rise of socialism instead of as a natural outcome of capitalism. So this despicable, disgusting person, Matthew Lau, is intensely illiterate. The latter point is an important one, for it is often believed that socialism merely makes people worse off. In fact, socialism also makes people worse, more envious, greedy, uncharitable, uncooperative, unfair, irresponsible, careless, wasteful, slothful, childish, short-sighted, intolerant, corrupt, controlling, dishonest, and stupid. Big projection, eh? Look at the projection. Look at the projecting. Like, I'm going to look at my society, acknowledge all of the things that are absolutely true about it, and blame it on the rise of socialism that is invisible and nowhere to be seen in the country. Like, we are a heavily capitalist nation. This is incredibly brutal. Of course, people are to some extent all of these things, whatever economic system, but socialism makes them so much more so and has no redeeming qualities. This guy basically sounds like he took like one of the speeches I make and then just switched capitalism and socialism. Socialists often castigate capitalism for promoting greed, when in reality, greed and envy are at the heart of the socialist system. Remember, like Goebbels said, accuse other people for that which you are guilty. Right? Here you are. I have never understood, Thomas Sowell wrote, and it's important to know who Thomas Sowell is, by the way. He's one of these hack neoliberal economists who he's an African American who literally says that African Americans are responsible for their own inequality, right? So he's like an Uncle Tom style figure who blames black people for being poor. And this is incredible. Why is it greed to want to keep the money you have earned, but not the greed to want to take someone else's money? Socialists insist that they are entitled to a fair share of other people's money, but why any share greater than zero is fair, they fail to explain. So Matthew Lau is illiterate. He's illiterate, right? Like, this is illiteracy at this point. You are writing an article titled, that has a tagline title, The Capitalist Manifesto. Perhaps, crazy thought, you should actually read the Communist Manifesto that this is a riff on. Perhaps you should actually become literate, right? They fail to explain except, Das Kapital, right? The Communist Manifesto. Even the Wealth of Nations explains it. Nor do socialists generally say what share they would consider fair, as it seems that whatever the share, they want more, even when top earners pay a marginal income tax rate of more than 50%. Like this diluted bullshit. Even when top earners pay a marginal income tax rate of more than 50%, as they currently do in all but 2 provinces, but we know that they don't, right? Like, this is just some delusional, like, lying, essentially, right? All you got to do is lie, and then you can say what you like. With greed and envy central to socialism, the picture painted by socialists of their economic system as compassionate is a fraud. It is no coincidence that as government economic control expands, charitable giving is reduced. So this is just said. In fact, it is difficult to point to a time and place with greater charitable activity than the United States in the second half of the 19th century, the heyday of free market capitalism. So if you offer no services whatsoever and have people collapsing on the streets in poverty, and then say, people are going to give more money than if you actually create social systems. Like, this is a terrible, terrible argument to be expected from somebody who's as duplicitous as this. Unfortunately, as the government increasingly coerced donations via the tax system, it destroyed a significant amount of private charitable... Like, this is a terrible argument. The replacement of private charity by government spending in the United States, Canada, and elsewhere has been disastrous. And again, this is just said. Like, there's no evidence or facts here. With donations to governments, donors gave out not love, but because they do not want to go to jail. Many capitalists voluntarily will give to private charities, but if large numbers of socialists are happily remitting to the government higher amounts than they owe in taxes, it has not been widely noticed or reported because it hasn't been widely done, right? It has not been widely noticed or reported because it doesn't matter, right? Like, capitalists give a penny. Like, if a capitalist gives 0.0001 of their wealth, then that's like $100 million. And we all look at it and go like, yeah, so he's got $53 billion. Replacing private charity with legal entitlement has also deleteriously affected recipients who have become ungrateful and demanding. Oh yeah, blaming the victim, classic. The best example might be the heavily subsidized university undergrads from middle upper class families who demand that their entire tuitions bill get shoved into the back of taxpayers, many of whom are far from less privileged. Gross. You should live in debt. Student debt is fine, right? Like, so much for his moral capitalist system. In addition to making recipients thankless, like, isn't it weird how capitalists think we should be jerking them off the whole time? Like, thank you, daddy. Thank you, daddy. That's what the capitalists want because they're psychopaths, right? Like, this is psychopathic. In addition to making recipients thankless, the ruinous compassion of government programs has also, by introducing moral hazard, I love this, provoked a wide range of destructive behaviors and attitudes. Government welfare programs that entitle people to subsidies if they're in unfortunate situations may make sense when limited and targeted to those experiencing real hardships, but today such programs are so numerous and bloated that they effectively subsidize people to be lazy, waste their time, take foolish risks, squander money, take their education unseriously, neglect their health, become unproductive, behave as irresponsible idiots, and otherwise act in ways that are socially and economically destructive. There's literally no evidence for any of this. This person is illiterate. Like, this is illiteracy we're seeing here. I can't believe that the Financial Post would actually publish this. Like, and especially publish it underneath, like, the Capitalist Manifesto. Like, this shit is just said. There's no evidence for it whatsoever. It's absolutely incredible that this got through an editor. Like, hey, maybe a chart, maybe any evidence whatsoever. Like, no, you're just going to say this shit. So it's just jerking the capitalist death cult off. The capitalist system promotes cooperation. In order to earn profits, businesses must make both to workers and to customers better offers than they. So when I read this, I'm just going to say it because it's obviously the truth. This guy doesn't understand what monopoly capitalism is, nor does he understand that capitalism results in monopolies. And he doesn't understand how it works. So, like, once you understand what a monopoly is, listen to how stupid this sounds. The capitalist system promotes cooperation. In order to earn profits, businesses must make both to workers and to customers better offers than they receive anywhere else, or else risk losing them to competitors. You have a monopoly, you don't have competitors. People are free to choose, under the capitalist system, what to buy and sell and from where at what price. By contrast, the top-down control of socialism unfailingly promotes disorder. Because remember, guys, chaos brings order, right? This is how the capitalists think. Chaos brings order. Order brings chaos, right? If you have a plan, that creates chaos. No wonder with people like this publishing in the Financial Post why the Canadian economy is in the shitter. By contrast, the top-down control of socialism unfailingly promotes disorder, which is why the Chinese were able to build a high-speed rail system in their own borders in 12 years. Disorder. The man of system, as Adam Smith called the conceited central planner, seems to imagine that he can arrange the different members of the great society with as much ease as the hand arranges the different pieces on a chessboard. I almost guarantee that if we go and find this Adam Smith quote in The Wealth of Nations, that it turns out that Adam Smith is actually extolling the planner virtuously. That's usually how these illiterate boobs work. These duplicitous liars like Matthew Lau. I can't believe that this is being published in the Financial Post. Like, I can't believe the Financial Post would discredit themselves so openly and willingly. But people aren't chess pieces, and forcing them in a direction they did not choose, for example, by dictating how they must spend their money or what industries they must work with, causes society to be miserable, as Smith said, at all times in the highest degree of disorder. So, again, like, literally no evidence for this. And also, like, once again, how dare we have rules, right? How dare we create rules and then follow those rules, right? How authoritarian. Enamored by their top-down economic and social designs and convinced of their righteousness, yet not abandoning people into homelessness and poverty, I am convinced of the righteousness of that position, you fucking psychopath. Socialists are overwhelmingly intolerant of diversity, hostile toward individual choice. I mean, if the individual choice is abandoning people to the streets or, like, allowing vampires to exist, right? Like, this is what these guys are arguing for. And closed-minded to ideas not their own. Well, I mean, we're closed-minded to genocide, for example, right? Something that I think Matthew Lau would actually be in favor of. Like, yes, we're closed-minded to murder and genocide. Like, we can capitulate that. In recent years, partially because blatant large-scale government economic planning is disreputable in many quarters, socialism has become intertwined with climate alarmism. This guy's a fraud. I wouldn't trust him to give me advice on like what car to buy. And oh, here comes the word, an enforcement of wokeness. Right? If there is a word that these guys use that discredits them faster, I'm yet to find it. Wokeness is 100% their like key word that they use to wink and nudge at one another while being complete and total utter frauds. Both ideologies that, like socialism, politicize commercial activity and rely on privileged ruling class. Like, listen to this. Listen to this. I love it. He describes capitalism perfectly and attributes it to socialism. Like socialism, politicize commercial activity, rely on a privileged ruling class exercising oppressive top-down control. That's capitalism. Turning increasingly from free market capitalism to head down this path is an act of absurdity. It's only an act of absurdity given the fact that you're illiterate. Like, this guy doesn't know anything. Like, he's ranting like an old man. Socialism leads invariably to less freedom, more misery, and a society where people are not only worse off, but worse. Yeah. This guy's a loser. Right? I think the only reason the Financial Post allowed this guy to shit this out on their pages is because they couldn't find anybody stupider. Right? Like, unbelievably duplicitous. Just saying things. Like, and boy howdy does this ever make the Financial Post just like, you cannot trust what they say. They're not presenting evidence or facts. This is ideological drivel. From the beginning to the end. Like, the reason why the Communist Manifesto is effective is because it uses evidence. It uses facts. Because they are actual economists. Like, read Das Kapital. Like, boy, evidence and facts are sure nice. Capitalism steals the resources from the third world, and what's so bad is that people that live in the capital of capitalism are now living conditions are close to those in third world countries. Yeah, it's starting to happen. Okay, guys. We've come to the end of today's stream. Hi, DJ. I don't know if I said hi to you, but hi. Good to see you, bud. You came in real late. All right, guys. Always remember, quite seriously, you are a quantum being living in quantum energy. These billionaires, these fucking psychopaths, right? This shit that I just read out loud right here, this is what they think. These total fucking psychopaths are doing everything they can to enslave you. And these are the lies that they're using to do it. DJ is saying every space has an impact on the people inside it. You can shape your environment, but in turn, your environment shapes you. Yeah. And that's why it's important for us to create an environment that is livable, where we can actually exist and protect ourselves from these fucking vampires. Which we should definitely do. Because each and every one of us is a quantum being living in quantum energy. We are equal in our validity. As much as they try to tear us down, we are equal in our validity. All right, guys. Rebel, revolt, repent, like, share, subscribe. Send $1 my way if you've got $1 jingling around your pocket. Good luck. We're going to need it.